Hello, my dear friend of sleepy history. We meet again on a gentle, peaceful evening. I am here, right beside you, to help you let go of all the worries, pressures, and troubles that may still linger after a long day, and softly drift into a warm, peaceful sleep. Trust that my voice will guide you on a journey through time, filled with comfort and calm. Tonight, before we begin, perhaps you still remember that last night we explored the Hadean Aeon, when Earth was newly formed, wild and scorching, enduring its first cosmic storms. And now, please gently close your eyes, take a deep, slow breath, and allow your imagination to soar far beyond any boundaries. Let us travel back more than 4 billion years, when this planet carried within it the memory of ancient stardust, surviving fierce meteor showers, rivers of molten rock, and restless, churning waves. In that harsh, unforgiving world, the very first sparks of life began to awaken, fragile, yet determined, opening a new chapter in the wondrous journey of evolution. This is the Archean, the journey of origins, where you will hear the very first heartbeats of life, feel the first breaths of the earth, and let those ancient melodies gently lull you into the sweetest of dreams. And if, at some point, you find your eyes softly closing, please feel free to leave a comment, so the entire Sleepy History family can send you warm wishes and the most peaceful dreams. Crescent Moon, let tonight gently carry you on slow, steady breaths, like ancient waves softly caressing a distant shore. As memories drift back to the night before, do you remember? Earth was once a fiery child, just born from the magnificent Big Bang, twisting in molten rock and meteor showers, staggering through endless chaos. And yet, through it all, this planet patiently repaired itself, gathering each broken shard to weave hope anew, just as a human heart learns to heal after sorrow. Tonight, as your eyelids grow heavy, I invite you to step into the Archean Aeon, where Earth learned to breathe more slowly, to soothe its burned scars, and to let the primal oceans wrap around it like a gentle balm. In the thin mists of deep time, the very first cells began to stir, whispering the first notes of life. Imagine this place, where the faint sun shone through rising steam, comforting a still fragile planet, like a lullaby from the universe itself, sung to nurture every seed of rebirth. You, too, deserve such shelter, such healing, such a chance to let go of your burdens and trust that after every storm, calm will return. In every Archean heartbeat, you might recognize yourself, a part of Earth, quietly learning to stand strong and recover. Let this story cradle you tonight, carrying you toward the sweetest, most peaceful dreams. Part 1: The First Bacteria. 1. Fossil evidence of ancient bacteria. In the gentle hush of an ancient sunrise, more than 3 billion years ago, the Archean world slowly stirred to life. The seas were warm, laced with iron and minerals, and the air was far from the breathable sky we know today. In this dreamlike, alien environment, the first chapters of life began to write themselves upon the canvas of the earth. Though no flowers bloomed, no fish swam, and no green forests waved in the wind, something small, hidden, and patient was growing, already weaving a quiet story of survival and hope. These earliest bacterial pioneers left behind a fossil legacy so delicate yet so enduring that even across billions of years, we can still hold its echoes in our hands. Let your mind relax and float over those shallow Archean seas, where calm tides moved across endless tidal flats. Here, one of the most beautiful and persistent testaments of early bacterial life took shape: the stromatolites. These layered, stony domes and columns were built, layer by layer, by ancient microbial mats that gently trapped sediments, binding them together with a sticky, organic film. Over time, these microbes, many of them cyanobacteria, formed magnificent structures that still stand today in places like Shark Bay, Australia, reminding us of a time when life was quiet, simple, and yet incredibly powerful. The stromatolites rose slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if in rhythm with the slow heartbeat of the planet. Each layer of microbes exhaled tiny wisps of oxygen, not yet enough to transform the world, but enough to begin a story of planetary change. As the microbes trapped sediment grains in their sticky coverings, they left behind a fossil pattern, lamination upon lamination, preserved through time. These structures are, in a sense, fossils of teamwork, of communities that work together to resist waves and currents, building a monument of cooperation in the shallow seas. If you listen with your imagination, you might hear the whisper of their tiny bubbles, lifting oxygen into the water around them. These ancient microbes, in their protective mats, shielded themselves from harsh ultraviolet rays, from drying out at low tide, and from the mechanical pounding of waves. Layer after layer, year after year, they survived and flourished, recording their quiet presence in stone. Modern scientists can study these fossil stromatolites, seeing microscopic textures of once living filaments, delicate tubes, and even preserved organic residues, all acting like a lullaby from the distant past, telling us life was here and life was strong. Beyond their shapes and textures, these ancient bacterial architects have a deeper legacy. Within their mats, we find the cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green bacteria. These remarkable organisms were among the very first to develop oxygenic photosynthesis, the magical ability to use sunlight to split water and release oxygen. The cyanobacteria spread out across the warm, sunlit shallows, forming extensive carpets of greenish film, each cell capturing the sun's energy and weaving it into organic molecules. Imagine these cyanobacteria swaying gently in the Archean tides, harvesting light, storing energy, and slowly, patiently, altering the local chemistry of the world. Though the oceans were rich in dissolved iron, which quickly grabbed up any oxygen, the cyanobacteria continued to work, day after day, sending out minute traces of free oxygen that would eventually, over vast expanses of time, accumulate to change our entire atmosphere. Their photosynthetic pigments, similar to chlorophyll, left behind a chemical fingerprint. We can still find traces of these molecules embedded in Archean rocks, a subtle hint that photosynthetic life flourished in these ancient oceans. This fingerprint is like a lullaby written in chemistry, assuring us that even at the dawn of Earth's story, life was already learning to harvest sunlight and transform its environment. But beyond structures and pigments, there is another clue, almost invisible to the eye but powerful in its message: the carbon itself. In these oldest rocks, scientists have discovered carbon with isotope ratios that are distinctly biological. Life tends to favor the lighter carbon isotope, carbon-12, over the heavier carbon-13 because of the way living enzymes process carbon. When ancient rocks show a strong preference for carbon-12, it is a quiet but unmistakable voice from the past, telling us that microbes were at work there, transforming inorganic carbon dioxide into the building blocks of life. These biosignatures of carbon, carbon enriched in carbon-12, are preserved in graphite grains and organic carbon remnants within the oldest sedimentary rocks. They whisper to us, across billions of years, that a living world once pulsed here. In some places, these signatures go back as far as 3.7 billion years, challenging our imagination to comprehend a time so deep, so remote, that even mountains would rise and erode away before it ended. Yet through all those changes, these carbon whispers remain, like a comforting story softly repeating. Life is resilient, life is patient, life endures. Together, these three lines of evidence, the fossil stromatolites, the cyanobacteria preserved in mineralized mats, and the carbon isotope signals, create a strong and gentle chorus of proof. They tell us that the Archean world was far from barren. It was alive even if its life was microscopic and simple. It was a world busy with tiny architects building stone mounds, greenish films capturing sunlight, and carbon atoms being woven into living frameworks. Let this image rest in your mind. A calm, mineral-rich sea under a pale sun, dotted with growing microbial colonies. No predators yet, no complex food webs, only these tiny bacterial communities dancing with the tides, thriving through cooperation and gentle persistence. Their fossil traces are not loud or showy. They are subtle, delicate, requiring the patient eyes of modern scientists to see and interpret. But they hold an almost magical calm, a sense that life does not need to roar to change the world. Sometimes it only needs to grow one grain at a time and trust the gentle push of time to build a legacy. As you relax into the soothing rhythm of these thoughts, remember that everything familiar today, the trees, the birds, our own beating hearts, has roots in this quiet world. Stromatolites are like ancestral monuments, honoring the courage of microbes that faced an alien sea and learned to turn sunlight into life. Cyanobacteria are like ancient gardeners, patiently seeding the conditions that would one day allow complex creatures to thrive. And the carbon signals are like handwritten notes, carefully tucked into the rocks, reminding us of the power of chemistry in the hands of the smallest beings. There is a special peace in knowing that something so tiny could have made a world so full of hope. Each fossil, each carbon grain, each layer of stromatolite is a lullaby in stone, a quiet promise that life, once begun, is hard to extinguish. So let yourself drift, gently, across those warm Archean shallows. Picture the soft mats of microbes, the domes of stromatolites rising in the tide, the greenish shimmer of cyanobacteria spreading like delicate lace over sunlit waters. Feel the calm patience of these earliest ecosystems, working in silence, building up oxygen, binding sediments, and recording their triumphs in carbon. They did not hurry, they did not fight, they simply persisted, in harmony with the sunlight and the waves, and in doing so, set the stage for all of Earth's future wonders. Sleep comes easily in such a story, for there is no fear here, only the slow unfolding of a world, guided by tiny but determined life. And in those first breaths of oxygen, carried upward by ancient cyanobacteria, lies a message as gentle as any bedtime song. Life will find a way, even in the most silent dawn. 2. The earliest photosynthesis. Let your mind travel gently back to an ocean more than 3 billion years ago, under a sun that rose on a world far different from ours. There were no trees to rustle, no animals to stir the waves, only a vast expanse of water, warm and softly shimmering, holding the simple stirrings of early life. In that ancient sea, one of nature's greatest miracles was beginning to unfold, the first photosynthesis. Imagine, if you will, countless tiny cyanobacteria drifting through sunlit shallows. These delicate cells carried pigments that could capture sunlight, transforming it into the energy they needed to grow. At its heart, photosynthesis is a gentle kind of magic, a way for life to drink in the sun, to store its light, and to share its power. Cyanobacteria learned to use the sunlight to convert carbon dioxide, dissolved in Archean seawater, into simple sugars that could sustain them. With every tiny flash of sunlight, they were weaving a quiet revolution into the story of Earth. During this process, they released oxygen as a byproduct. At first, this oxygen was local and fleeting. The Archean Ocean was still hungry for iron, and that iron quickly took up the oxygen, forming rust-red sediments that settled to the ocean floor. It was as if the world was so thirsty for oxygen that it snatched every molecule away before it could linger. But over time, the steady work of photosynthesizing microbes changed the chemistry of seawater itself. Layer after layer, their oxygen built up, slowly, patiently, in pockets around the microbial mats. These tiny oases of breathable gas became important stepping stones in the long path toward an oxygen-rich planet. Picture the scene: the shallows warmed by the soft Archean sun, cyanobacteria floating like miniature solar panels, drawing in light and breathing out oxygen, their gentle presence slowly shifting the destiny of the atmosphere. It is calming to think that something so small, so simple, could quietly tip the balance of the world. These first sparks of photosynthesis were fragile. They happened in narrow, favorable zones where enough sunlight could penetrate, yet conditions were not too harsh. The cyanobacteria formed dense colonies on tidal flats, creating layered mats that could withstand drying out, waves, and grazing by other microorganisms. In these mats, sunlight reached just far enough to fuel photosynthesis, but not so harshly that it burned their delicate structures. Within these protective mats, oxygen accumulated during daylight, providing a brief window of breathable air for other microbes living nearby. At night, oxygen levels fell again, reminding us how young and tentative this photosynthetic revolution truly was. There is a quiet beauty in imagining these cycles. Day after day, sunlight would gently awaken the mats, oxygen would bloom around them, then fade again with nightfall. Like a soft lullaby, repeated over and over, it shaped the first rhythm of Earth's living world. This slow drip of oxygen began to change the oceans. Iron dissolved in seawater rusted out, forming ancient banded iron formations that we still see today in rocks around the world. These layered stones are like pages of a very old diary, preserving the memory of the first oxygen producers. Although there was not yet enough oxygen to fill the atmosphere, these local oxygen blooms were a profound turning point. They demonstrated that sunlight could drive a new kind of chemistry, a pathway that would, much later, support complex plants and animals. The gift of photosynthesis was more than sugar for cyanobacteria. It was a spark of transformation for the entire planet. Some of the oxygen escaped its iron traps, rising up and lingering just a little longer each day. Over millions of years, these tiny escapes built a thin veil of oxygen in shallow waters, giving a foothold to later organisms that would fully embrace oxygen-based life. The meaning of this early photosynthesis cannot be overstated. It was the first step toward the air we breathe. It allowed carbon to be stored in living forms, setting the stage for a rich, dynamic carbon cycle that still runs Earth's biosphere today. It showed that the sun was not merely a source of warmth, but a partner for life. A steady, reliable energy stream that could be harnessed again and again. If you rest for a moment and imagine that Archean Ocean, you might see how sunlight fell softly on cyanobacteria colonies, gently nudging them to grow, to reproduce, to send oxygen out into their surroundings. You might picture the oxygen bubbles clinging to their surfaces, shimmering like tiny gems before drifting away into the water. In that simple act of splitting water with sunlight, cyanobacteria created not only the foundation of their own survival, but a new hope for all future life. Photosynthesis was a gift of gentle power, quiet but unstoppable, weaving its influence into every corner of the Archean Sea. At the same time, this process had profound effects on the atmosphere. Even before oxygen became widespread, the removal of carbon dioxide by photosynthesizers subtly shifted Earth's greenhouse balance, influencing temperatures and ocean chemistry. This soft push would eventually help stabilize Earth's climate, making it more welcoming to increasingly diverse life. It is peaceful to think of sunlight as a partner. How, from these first cyanobacteria to the tallest tree today, the sun has been there, patiently fueling growth, gently cradling life. That bond, forged billions of years ago, is still with us. Every time you feel warmth on your skin or see green leaves reaching upward, when you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that the air you breathe began as a gift from these first photosynthesizers. Their delicate cells, floating in calm, iron-rich seas, learned to catch the sunlight and share its energy. In doing so, they wrote the first verses of Earth's oxygen story, a song that still echoes through every breath you take. So rest now, knowing that the quiet work of tiny cyanobacteria long ago prepared the way for you, for animals, for forests, for all the wondrous, breathing world. Their gentle revolution reminds us that even the smallest, simplest actions, repeated with patience, can change the entire future. 3. Early microbial biosphere. Close your eyes for a moment and allow your imagination to sink below the warm, gentle waters of an Archean sea. Here, more than 3 billion years ago, a delicate world of microscopic life was weaving itself into being, calm, unseen, but quietly powerful. In this vast Archean ocean, countless invisible organisms had begun to weave together, creating a subtle yet powerful living network. These earliest microbes were learning a lesson that even modern humans still struggle to perfect. That cooperation is stronger than isolation, that working together can sustain life even in the harshest environments. They formed what we might call a microbiosphere, a community made entirely of microscopic organisms, each playing its part in a balanced web of exchange. These simple, ancient cells lived in close-knit mats, layered atop each other on shallow tidal flats. Some could catch sunlight and transform it into food. Others could harvest energy from minerals brought up by volcanic vents. Some specialized in cleaning up waste products, turning them back into usable nutrients. Try to imagine this quiet harmony. Billions of tiny cells sharing resources, creating a cycle where nothing was wasted, where the waste of one became the food for another. It is peaceful to think of these microbes as soft threads in a vast, living fabric. A fabric that was woven gently, day after day, under the golden Archean sun. Among these early players, sulfur-metabolizing bacteria had a vital role. These tiny engineers could transform sulfur compounds, taking advantage of the rich supply of sulfur pouring into the oceans from endless volcanic eruptions. Some bacteria learned to use sulfate as an electron acceptor in their metabolism, allowing them to survive without oxygen. Others, later on, could oxidize sulfur back to sulfate, replenishing what had been consumed. This cycling of sulfur became one of the first great elemental pathways of the Earth, an elegant dance between chemical states, passing sulfur around like a gentle gift. In a world where oxygen was still rare and precious, sulfur pathways offered microbes a reliable lifeline. They allowed energy to flow, kept nutrients circulating, and created stability where chaos might otherwise have reigned. You can almost feel the calm of these exchanges, a patient choreography of cells passing sulfur from hand to hand, sustaining each other in a world that could have been so hostile. The Archean Ocean was filled with dissolved metals, with acidity that fluctuated and temperatures that shifted between extremes. Yet these microbial networks endured because they worked together, trusting in a quiet resilience that only cooperation could provide. The influence of these tiny communities went far beyond their mats. As they processed sulfur, carbon, and other elements, they slowly but surely changed the chemistry of seawater itself. They could shift the pH, alter how iron and other metals dissolved, and create microzones rich in nutrients. Their presence created small, hidden pockets of habitability in an ocean that was otherwise challenging for life. Imagine walking across an Archean tidal flat if you could. The sun would be pale, the air heavy with volcanic gases, the land barren and silent. But under your feet, layered microbial mats would be alive with color and purpose. Cyanobacteria on top, capturing sunlight and giving off tiny whispers of oxygen. Beneath them, sulfur-breathing microbes recycling minerals, feeding on the leftovers, and creating a stable chemical foundation for life. Every microbe had a task, every layer had a reason. There were no predators yet, no frantic competitions, only the soft breathing of life cooperating, gently transforming its surroundings. Day after day, tides would wash in minerals, and day after day, these microbes would absorb, process, and recycle, making the seawater a bit more hospitable each time. Their teamwork sowed the seeds of durability. Archean seas were anything but calm. Storms swept through. Volcanic plumes poured chemicals into the water. Temperatures could swing wildly. But the microbial mats were like a woven basket, each strand supporting the others. If one kind of microbe suffered, the others compensated, keeping the whole ecosystem alive. Over millions of years, these small, local networks grew more complex. New species joined in, bringing new tricks, new ways to share and recycle resources. The sulfur cycle itself became more sophisticated, eventually linking to iron cycles, carbon cycles, and even the early hints of nitrogen pathways. From these earliest webs of cooperation, the grand elemental cycles of the planet were born, patterns that still govern the Earth today. Modern geologists can still trace these ancient stories, finding signatures in the rocks. Sulfur isotopes, carbon isotopes, and patterns in sedimentary layers reveal that these early microbial communities were not only present, but thriving and already reshaping the chemistry of the world. It is comforting, almost like a lullaby, to realize that the patterns of cooperation and sharing were written into life's script from the very beginning. Through these exchanges, the early microbiosphere subtly prepared the oceans for future living things. They adjusted salinity, buffered the acidity, and stabilized the availability of trace metals. These shifts meant that eventually oxygen-based life would have a chance to rise. In a way, these tiny communities acted like the first gardeners of the sea, tending to the watery garden so that more complex organisms could grow later. Their layered structure also allowed them to withstand dry spells and changing tides. The uppermost mats might dry under a hot sun, but lower layers stayed moist and active. Some microbes developed protective sheaths to survive drying, while others could retreat into spore-like states, patiently waiting for kinder waters to return. This gave the microbiosphere remarkable resilience, letting it persist through environmental changes that might have killed less adaptable life. It is soothing to think of how life found such patience. These early microbes did not race or struggle in chaos, but learned to persist slowly, steadily, together. In their calm sharing, they found a kind of peace that still resonates billions of years later. If you pause to imagine, you can almost see those mats shimmering under gentle Archean light, breathing softly in rhythm with the tides. A pulse of sunlight by day, a quiet darkness by night, all woven together in a lullaby of elemental cycles. Nothing hurried, nothing wasted, only a patient hope, repeated over and over, that life could continue. And continue it did. The microbiosphere's gentle mastery of sulfur and other elements built the foundation for future oxygen-based metabolisms. By creating local oxygen oases, even if fleeting, these communities started to hint at what the world might someday become. A place where larger, more complex beings could thrive. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember that the air you breathe, the oceans you visit, even the soil beneath your feet, all carry traces of these ancient communities. Their silent networks taught Earth how to sustain life, showing that collaboration and patience can build strength that endures beyond measure. They remind us softly that even the smallest beings, holding hands across billions of years, can change the entire course of a planet. That truth, whispered from cell to cell in the calm Archean seas, still echoes in every green leaf, every breath of wind, every living heart that beats today. So rest peacefully, knowing that the gentle work of these first microbial engineers still cradles our world, as it once cradled theirs, in quiet balance, in soft rhythms, in a promise that life, if given the chance, will always find a way. Part 2. Microbial Population Development. 1. Diversification of bacterial lineages. Let your mind float softly once again, returning to that gentle Archean world, more than 3 billion years ago. Picture the oceans, calm and warm, their surface kissed by sunlight, while deep within, life was quietly blossoming in ways no eye could yet see. During these peaceful early eras, microbes had already begun laying the foundations of cooperation. But now, a new miracle was stirring: diversification. From a few simple ancestors, lineages began to branch out, carrying with them subtle differences, each finding its own tiny niche in a world that was vast and full of possibilities. You might think of it as a slow and graceful unfolding of a great living tapestry. Where once there were only a few types of metabolism, now many more appeared. Some microbes evolved new ways to harvest energy, perhaps learning to metabolize iron dissolved in seawater. Others refined sulfur pathways to suit changing conditions, while still others started to experiment with simple nitrogen compounds. This was the first quiet song of biodiversity, sung on a microscopic scale. As these early bacterial lineages diversified, they did not do so in haste or in chaos, but with a steady and patient rhythm, guided by the gentle push of natural selection. Each group found a corner to call its own, some in oxygen-poor shallows, others around hydrothermal vents, some clinging to grains of sediment, others drifting freely in the water column. These ancient microbes invented a wide range of metabolisms, almost like tiny alchemists experimenting with new recipes. There were fermenters that broke down organic molecules without oxygen, methanogens that crafted methane as a byproduct, and sulfate reducers that continued their vital roles. Over time, the list grew longer, weaving a complex and interconnected web of nutrient flow. Imagine the calm of a shallow tidal pool on a quiet Archean afternoon. The water is still, sunlight filters through in golden rays, and within that pool, millions of invisible bacteria are each playing their subtle part. Some gather carbon dioxide from the water, others pull trace elements from nearby rocks, while a few adjust to tiny pulses of oxygen released by sunlight capturing cyanobacteria. These delicate balances built stability, like a lullaby repeated again and again, steady and comforting. Local variations in oxygen, perhaps produced only during the day and quickly consumed, allowed microcommunities to explore microaerobic metabolisms. These were small, fragile windows into a world with a bit more oxygen, an experiment, you might say, with what the future could become. Meanwhile, in other corners of the Archean Ocean, anaerobic lineages thrived. They specialized in life without oxygen, perfecting pathways that could harvest energy from simple molecules in the dark, in mud, or in volcanic seeps. This split between oxygen-tolerant and oxygen-avoiding microbes was one of the first great forks in the tree of life, a branching that would echo for billions of years. It is soothing to think that there was no violence here, no hurry, just a slow, careful division of labor. Each new group carved out a place to belong. Each new metabolism took hold, and together they made life stronger. Nature's earliest community was not a battlefield, but a gently expanding web of peaceful coexistence. Over time, these lineages adapted even more closely to their local minerals. Some evolved ways to harvest energy from iron ions dissolved in Archean waters, giving rise to iron-oxidizing bacteria that left behind bands of iron-rich sediments, quiet clues that would one day tell their story to scientists in our time. Others developed enzymes to break down sulfur even more efficiently, subtly changing the sulfur chemistry of their environment. This metabolic diversity was not just interesting, it was essential. The oceans of the Archean were filled with shifting chemicals, periodic bursts of volcanic material, and changing temperatures. Only a diverse, adaptable community could withstand these shifts. The many bacterial lineages, each with its own skills, acted like a team, keeping the flow of carbon, sulfur, nitrogen, and iron stable through good times and bad. Even though no eyes could see them, these microbes made profound marks on the earth. The first hints of stromatolites, those layered microbial rocks, show signs of these diverse communities living together, each layer specialized, each layer supporting another. Within these structures, symbiosis reached a new height. Oxygen producers on top, anaerobes below, all interwoven like a living quilt. If you close your eyes, you might imagine standing beside a stromatolite reef, hearing only the gentle lapping of waves. There is no rush, no roar of animals, just a subtle dance of chemistry happening in layers beneath the surface. Over millions of years, these reefs would grow, stabilized by the metabolic flexibility of their residents, patiently rewriting the oceans, grain by grain, breath by breath. This diversification also opened the door to future complexity. With many kinds of metabolisms, evolution had more options to build on. When oxygen eventually became abundant, some lineages were already prepared to adapt, thanks to these early experiments in using trace amounts of oxygen. Others continued thriving without oxygen, ready to fill anoxic environments that would persist on the planet for eons to come. In a way, this was life's rehearsal for everything that followed. Testing, refining, exploring, never rushing, always repeating its quiet verses, as if the Archean world itself was singing a lullaby, reminding every living cell that patience and cooperation can build wonders. Even now, geologists can read this ancient chapter. Tiny chemical signatures left in iron formations, sulfur deposits, and carbon ratios all whisper of the microbial diversification that unfolded steadily, beautifully, across vast oceans. Their patterns speak of innovation without cruelty, of sharing without greed, of growth without violence. So tonight, if you drift toward dreams, let yourself feel comforted by these stories. They remind us that all great diversity begins humbly, with small differences, gentle experiments, and countless acts of cooperation. The bacterial lineages of the Archean did not rush to dominate, but instead found peace in filling their own spaces, in taking only what they needed, and in trusting that nature's quiet rhythms would sustain them. That lesson, that diversity strengthens life, that many hands make for steady survival, is still true today. It was true for the earliest microbes, it is true for the forests, for the coral reefs, for human communities, and for every network of beings that choose to live gently together. So breathe easy, knowing that 3 billion years ago, the first great diversification of life was already sowing seeds for everything beautiful to come. In their calm persistence, those earliest bacteria shaped the world we love, leaving a legacy of harmony that continues to flow through every living thing. Sleep peacefully, carried by their lullaby, and trust, just as they trusted, that the simplest dreams, if shared, can grow into something grand. 2. Growth of microbial populations. Have you ever wondered how something so tiny could one day quietly claim an entire world? Let me guide you through a gentle story, whispered across the vast calm of the Archean oceans, about how the smallest forms of life gathered their strength, expanded, and patiently built an invisible empire beneath the waters. In the very beginning, these microbial communities were sparse, delicate, and scattered. They clung to grains of sediment, formed thin mats on rocks, or drifted alone in gentle currents. They survived where they could, making do with the faintest traces of nutrients. Yet across countless years, a quiet promise began to unfold. They grew. One cell divided into 2, then 4, then hundreds, then millions, then billions, all following a rhythm older than any star, pulsing softly through the shallows of a young planet. This growth was not a frantic conquest, but a measured unfolding, almost like the slow breathing of the earth itself. Nutrients arrived with the rise and fall of tides, iron, phosphorus, traces of nitrogen, and these ancient microbes learned to use those gifts wisely. They formed colonies in sturdy layers, clinging to the protection of rock, sediment, or even each other, creating safe spaces where they could multiply without being swept away by waves or storms. Picture a shallow Archean lagoon at dusk, the sky painted in muted oranges and grays, the waves barely moving. Below the surface, a quiet multitude of microbial communities was growing, breathing, exchanging chemicals, leaving tiny ripples of change in their watery realm. In these communities, roles began to specialize. Some cells became champions at capturing carbon, some learned to break down sulfur compounds, and others turned waste into resources. Their numbers grew together because they formed a woven partnership, each species supporting the next, each fulfilling a piece of a delicate blueprint that nature seemed to have written in invisible ink. The richness of nutrients in their surroundings shaped their rise. When iron was abundant, iron-metabolizing bacteria flourished, leaving behind iron-rich sediments that would one day become ancient banded iron formations. When sulfur trickled from deep-sea vents, sulfate-reducing bacteria thrived, spreading quietly through the mud and reshaping its chemistry. These microbial blooms were not random. They followed the gifts of their environment, responding in a synchrony as calm and measured as a lullaby. And yet, their growth was still carefully balanced by natural limits. When too many microbes crowded one place, they could strip away their nutrients and create waste that would poison them. So their populations rose and fell in gentle waves, a dance of abundance and retreat, of blooming and pausing, in harmony with the tides and cycles of sunlight. In this way, even these primitive cells practiced a kind of sustainability long before the word was ever spoken. As their numbers climbed, so too did their influence. Growing microbial populations changed the chemistry of the ocean waters on a larger and larger scale. They released organic compounds, absorbed metals, and altered local pH values. These changes did not remain isolated. They fed back into the ecosystem, reinforcing cycles of growth, slowly transforming their world into a more stable and nurturing place. It is soothing to imagine how even the smallest cells found a way to shape their environment, building their own gentle cradle for the future. They were patient gardeners of their own tiny gardens, preparing the oceans for what would come next. If you pause and listen, you might almost hear their story. Not a roar, but a hushed, steady murmur of countless cells dividing, sharing, cooperating. There was no rush, no violence, only steady confidence that the world would hold them if they grew together, and that together they were stronger than any one cell alone. The rocks, too, remember their blooming. Carbon-rich sediments, isotopic signatures locked in minerals, and the fossilized traces of microbial mats all bear silent witness to this chapter of hidden abundance. Their expansion was not a conquest, but a mindful unfolding of life. Sometimes, their growth may have surged after volcanic eruptions refreshed the oceans with minerals. At other times, populations shrank after droughts or temperature shifts. But through it all, the microbial world revealed its resilience. Even when conditions changed dramatically, a portion of these communities always survived, carrying forward the knowledge of how to begin again, how to rebuild, and how to continue. Another gentle wonder of these populations was the way they learned to form protective structures, like biofilms, to shelter each other from sudden changes in salinity or toxic compounds. These sticky, communal blankets held them close, allowing them to share nutrients and information in ways no solitary cell could ever match. Biofilms offered a first taste of what cooperation on a grand scale might one day become. Their population booms also left clues in the layers of stromatolites, where billions of microbes worked together, layer upon layer, to build complex reef-like structures. Each layer had its role. Oxygen producers at the top, anaerobes below, sulfur recyclers in between. A living architecture of incredible subtlety and harmony. It was within these microbial cities that life learned to maximize every gift of the sea, even the smallest beam of sunlight, even the faintest nutrients. If you close your eyes, you can almost feel the calm of these structures. Their strength born not from a single hero but from billions of tiny voices cooperating in perfect stillness. Over thousands of years, these communities would spread further, adapting to every coastline, every tidal pool, every shallow sea. They created microenvironments of stability, softening the chemical extremes of early Earth, and opening the path for more advanced life to someday flourish. Like caretakers, they slowly adjusted oxygen levels, recycled vital elements, and buffered against sudden changes. A profound legacy for creatures yet to come. This story of microbial growth is a gentle reminder that expansion can be patient and thoughtful. There was no mad rush to dominate. Instead, these tiny beings worked with the rhythms of the ocean, the light of day, the darkness of night, following a calm cycle of rest and bloom, of taking just enough to survive and leaving behind nourishment for the future. As you rest tonight, think of them, the first dreamers of abundance, the first to test how far life could spread across a world. Their quiet courage, multiplied through time, laid the solid foundation for every marvel that followed. Know that their memory still lives on in today's oceans, in the DNA of all modern microbes, and in the peaceful patterns of coral reefs and wetlands that echo their ancient lessons. Growth, they teach us, can be graceful, can be measured, can be kind. Sleep peacefully with that thought, knowing that 3 billion years ago, life grew softly and steadily, proving that gentleness and patience are powerful enough to transform a whole planet. Even now, the patient expansion of those earliest microbes continues to whisper through every living thing, reminding us that cooperation and calm perseverance can build wonders beyond imagining. 3. Early genetic evolution. Let us drift a little deeper now into a time when those ancient microbes, already learning how to share their worlds and their nutrients, began to discover an even greater gift: the power to pass on their secrets. Close your eyes, if you wish, and imagine the slow, measured breathing of 1 billion tiny lives, each holding within them a message, a code, a possibility of change. At first, the earliest cells relied on very simple ways to reproduce. Their genetic material, fragile and vulnerable, sometimes copied imperfectly, introducing tiny errors. These errors, though, were not always harmful. Sometimes they were little sparks of possibility, changes that might make a microbe slightly more efficient, slightly more robust, slightly better able to survive. In that sense, these first mutations were like small, hopeful dreams drifting across the waves of the Archean seas. RNA molecules, far simpler than our modern DNA, played a starring role in this hidden revolution. RNA could store instructions, but also help reactions happen, acting both as memory and as a tool. Some scientists call this the RNA world, a chapter when these versatile molecules were both script and stagehand, guiding the earliest life toward greater complexity. Imagine, gently, how a strand of RNA might have folded in upon itself, shaping a pattern that allowed a microbe to capture energy a bit faster, or to protect itself more completely from heat or salt. These changes were microscopic and invisible to any eye, but they were profound. They opened the door for evolution. Each new variation, each tiny copying mistake was a test. If the change worked, it stayed. If it failed, it was quietly forgotten. Over time, the best solutions were woven into the fabric of these simple creatures, passed along with every division, every generation, every bloom of microbial life. The early oceans became a kind of vast library, filled with experiments carried forward in countless microscopic books. This process of genetic trial and error, mutation, selection, inheritance, was the beginning of all later evolutionary wonders. From these tiny steps arose the ability to adapt, to learn, to respond to a shifting world. Just as microbes had learned to share nutrients, they now learned to share successful genetic tricks, spreading them through their communities, helping the whole ecosystem benefit. If you listen closely, it is as though you can hear the soft whisper of these changes, an ancient song of transformation carried on saltwater currents. No hurry, no violence, only a quiet, steady refining, generation after generation, across uncounted years. Within this silent revolution, RNA also began to interact with emerging strands of DNA, which would eventually take over as the great archive of life. DNA was more stable, less likely to break apart, and so the first delicate steps toward modern genetics began. Over millions of years, this partnership of RNA and DNA refined life's instructions, allowing living things to hold onto their successful patterns while still exploring new possibilities. It is almost poetic to think of how fragile these molecules were, yet how enduring their legacy became. The tiniest code, drifting through a warm, shallow sea, would one day shape blue whales, redwood trees, and even human dreams. But in the Archean, it was enough that it shaped a simple microbe that was already a miracle. And so, slowly, steadily, evolution began to leave its fingerprints on our planet. The smallest errors turned into powerful tools. The quiet acceptance of change turned into the grand dance of adaptation. These tiny, watery cells became the first to test what it meant to change, to improve, to hope. You can picture the calm Archean sea under starlight, carrying these minuscule codes from one place to another, letting chance encounters bring them together. Bits of genetic material floated between communities, sometimes carried by viruses, sometimes shared directly, sometimes picked up from broken cells. This gentle mixing added a new layer of creativity, letting life try countless solutions in parallel, searching for better ways to thrive. The rocks hold clues of this hidden story: ancient isotopic ratios, subtle carbon signatures, the hints of shifting metabolisms, all showing that change had taken root and was shaping the entire biosphere from its tiniest building blocks. If you breathe slowly tonight, perhaps you can sense the wonder of it, that even mistakes could become gifts, that even weakness could become strength, if given time and if treated gently. The microbes of the Archean remind us that there is no shame in imperfection, for it is from imperfection that all new beauty grows. So let your mind rest in that thought as you drift toward sleep. The story of early genetic evolution is a story of patient hope, of errors that turned into miracles, of fragile strands that learned to endure. It is a lullaby older than any song, a gentle promise that even the smallest changes, nurtured over time, can transform a world. Part 3: Formation of a Sustainable Earth's Crust. 1. Stabilization of the primitive crust. As we travel deeper into Earth's dreamlike past, let us pause here, in a chapter of profound quietness and subtle courage, the moment our young planet began to calm its inner storms. Imagine, if you wish, a world still trembling with its own birth pains. The Archean Earth was a place of fire and water, its surface shifting like restless skin, reshaped again and again by flows of molten rock and cosmic collisions. Volcanoes pulsed across the land, as if the Earth itself was taking ragged breaths, unsure of its own rhythm. Yet, within that wildness, a patient and gentle transformation began. Slowly, steadily, the first pieces of the planet's rocky crust learned to settle. The earliest crust was thin, fragile, and constantly recycled into the mantle below, like a fragile crust on a simmering pot. But time, so generous, so patient, offered the chance for change. Lava erupted over and over, spreading into sheets that cooled and hardened, until at last a stronger, thicker crust began to emerge. Picture, softly, this crust as the first protective blanket for a vulnerable world, a stabilizing skin to shield the delicate promise of future life. This crust did not form in an instant. It took countless cycles of heating and cooling, of building up and breaking down, of trial and renewal. Each eruption laid down new minerals. Each moment of cooling gave these minerals a chance to weave together in stronger patterns. In the end, a mosaic of rocks, more durable than before, began to resist being swallowed back by the churning mantle. Granitoid rocks, ancestors of our modern continental crust, began to appear. Their lighter composition allowed them to float atop denser oceanic plates, creating floating islands of stability on a planet still roiling with inner heat. These first continental seeds were like tiny harbors, catching the sun's warmth and holding water long enough for the earliest life to explore its possibilities. The thickening of Earth's crust also had another, quieter gift. It reduced the planet's most violent outbursts. As the crust became more robust, fewer magma plumes could tear through to the surface, and the boiling oceans had a better chance to cool. Under this more gentle regime, the temperature of the seas settled, giving microbes a chance to experiment and persist. Rain could fall and stay, rather than flashing immediately into steam. Rivers might meander, carving gentle paths rather than vanishing in scalding heat. In this steadiness, the seeds of ecosystems could root. Geologists see these changes today in ancient zircon crystals and ancient rocks dating back over 3 billion years. These time-worn minerals preserve hints of repeated heating and cooling, of partial melting and resolidification, of a growing balance between the surface and the deep interior. In them, we read the memory of how Earth took its first peaceful breaths. If you listen to this story with the ear of your heart, you might hear a lullaby in stone. The planet, once in turmoil, learned patience. The crust acted like a comforting embrace, gently protecting the fragile beginnings of life, promising a place where calm could triumph over chaos. Perhaps you can see the scene in your imagination. A scattered patchwork of granite islands under a peach-colored Archean sky, steam curling from their edges, shallow pools shimmering with minerals and warm sunlight. These pools, stable and enduring, became tiny laboratories for life, where microbes could dare to try, to change, to grow. In this way, the crust was not only rock, it was a cradle. It was a reassurance, whispered through the planet's deep time, that even after the most violent storms, there can be peace. That even a fiery, chaotic world can learn to hold stillness in its heart. This stabilization also reshaped Earth's appearance. Instead of endless oceans of lava, there were now islands with complex shorelines, tidal flats, gentle slopes. Microbial communities could begin to colonize these places, feeding on mineral-rich waters, building tiny mats of life along the shore, leaving behind traces of organic carbon that scientists still find today. These mats, the first biofilms on stable rock, were a collaboration of life and earth, woven together in delicate harmony. By slowing its internal turmoil, the thickening crust set the stage for plate tectonics, the gentle dance of continental fragments we know today. Instead of being endlessly devoured by magma, the first microcontinents began to drift, to collide, to shape new mountain chains. This gave rise to diverse habitats, from volcanic island arcs to deep, sheltered basins. In each place, the chance for life expanded, its experiments growing ever more sophisticated. It is deeply moving to think that the Earth, in its earliest youth, learned to cradle itself in this way. Like a child finding its balance after first shaky steps, our planet learned to steady its surface, to anchor itself, to trust in its own strength. And through this trust, it made a promise to all future creatures, that they would have solid ground on which to build their dreams. If you breathe slowly tonight, let this image soothe you. The same story plays out in us as well. We all have seasons of turbulence, moments when our inner fires threaten to break us apart. Yet with time, we can thicken our own crust, growing stronger, calmer, able to shield what is tender within us. The Earth shows us that healing is possible, and that stability is worth the patience it demands. So let yourself rest, knowing that billions of years ago, this planet took its first steps towards stillness. Its crust, grown from endless cycles of fire and water, became a lullaby of safety, a stone-born embrace for all life to come. And tonight, as you close your eyes, remember that same resilience is alive in you, carried forward from that ancient crust through every living cell, through every heartbeat, through every quiet dream of peace. 2. Archean tectonic activity. As Earth's earliest crust thickened and cooled, breathing a slow, steady rhythm into the planet's surface, a new and wondrous dance quietly began. These were the first whispers of plate tectonics, gentle, patient movements deep below, moving like the subtle rolling of shoulders in a creature's sleep. If you allow your mind to soften and your breath to slow, you might sense these ancient motions within you too, like a calm pulse under your own skin, reminding you that even what seems solid is always capable of change. In the Archean, Earth was far warmer than today, its interior swirling with intense heat. Deep within the mantle, powerful currents churned like molten rivers, carrying enormous energy from the depths toward the surface. This convecting mantle became the planet's hidden heartbeat, pushing and pulling at the new crust above it. Floating on this restless sea of heat were the first small fragments of continental crust, seeds of continents, or cratons, forming stable islands of rock in an otherwise ever-changing world. These cratons were not yet the majestic continents we recognize today, but rather tiny, primitive landmasses, like ancient rafts adrift on a sea of magma. They traveled slowly, colliding, separating, and drifting back again in a timeless waltz. With each meeting, they welded their boundaries tighter, growing stronger and more resilient, much like how a broken heart, after being tested and healed, becomes wiser and more enduring. You might imagine these drifting cratons as guardians of possibility, carrying the seeds of future lands on their backs. They gathered strength through repeated collisions, forging mountain ridges and thicker crust with each gentle embrace. It was in these slow, patient reunions that the foundation of Earth's continents was laid down. A story of healing through contact, of resilience through union. Scientists today call these wandering fragments microcontinents or protocontinents, and their movements offered the first clues of the vast tectonic migrations that would one day build familiar ranges, valleys, and plains. Their meandering was guided by the energy of Earth's molten core, where rising plumes of hot rock pushed up with a measured, soothing rhythm, setting the crust into gentle motion. Yet this dance was not always calm. There were moments of grinding friction, of unstoppable pressure, when plates crashed together with a slow, powerful crush. Rocks were folded, broken, and forced upward into ridges of steaming granite, still hot from the planet's feverish heart. If you could stand there, you might see a young mountain forming before your eyes, sharp-edged and glittering, shaped by the steady but irresistible force of tectonic movement. Other times, the plates simply slipped past one another, their rough surfaces catching, then releasing in a trembling sigh, like the world exhaling. These shifts, so easy to overlook, were small reminders that even the solid ground could tremble, and that stillness is never absolute. It is a healing lesson. Even the most unshakable parts of ourselves might slip sometimes, but they will find their balance again. What is truly beautiful is that these movements, far from being merely destructive, recycled life itself. Where one section of crust dove back down into the mantle, it carried along minerals, water, and the organic molecules of the young oceans. Deep inside, these materials melted, were transformed, and then returned to the surface through new volcanoes. Like a great circulatory system, Earth renewed and enriched its own skin, offering fresh nutrients, fresh warmth, and new foundations for life to build upon. There is such gentle wisdom in that cycle. Destruction and creation were partners, each nurturing the other in an endless loop of rebirth. What was buried came back transformed, and what was torn apart became the raw material for something stronger. In your own life, perhaps you have felt this too, that even loss or heartbreak can carry seeds of change, becoming a quiet power that helps you heal and grow. If you picture these proto-continents drifting slowly across a rolling ocean of magma, guided by the patient heartbeat of Earth's mantle. You might see your own journey reflected in them. You too have been carried through storms, sometimes broken, sometimes fused, yet always reshaping, always searching for a steadier place to stand. In the gentle push and pull of tectonic movement, there is a message. Change is not your enemy, but your companion on the path of healing. Imagine the Archean world in its raw beauty, vast, steaming ridges rising through the haze, shallow seas lapping against jagged rocks, volcanic islands breathing hot gases into the air. In those waters, life was just beginning to learn how to persist, taking in nutrients and light, dividing and evolving. The continents themselves moved beneath this cradle of life, testing their strength, rearranging their boundaries, offering new habitats in every shift. Every collision of these plates created possibilities. Freshwater pools among the rocks, warm volcanic beaches, new cracks for minerals to collect. Microbes found homes in these pockets, learning to adapt and to thrive. In that constant reshaping, the world became a rich mosaic, a pattern of shifting opportunities, a hopeful place where the first living cells rehearsed the miracles to come. If Earth had remained flat and silent, the oceans might never have found shelter, nutrients might never have circulated, and life might never have taken hold. But thanks to these ceaseless, gentle shifts, the world was stirred again and again, preventing stagnation and breathing new energy into every crevice. It is a soothing thought to know that even the planet's roughest movements held space for life to blossom. As you drift towards sleep tonight, feel free to imagine those ancient cratons drifting on a hidden current, patient and steady, colliding softly over millennia, knitting together stronger continents with every touch. Let that image remind you that even in your own collisions, the moments that feel like breaking, there is a subtle power shaping you, forging your heart into something wiser, more compassionate, more unyielding. You might even hear, if you listen deeply, the quiet song of Archean tectonics. A low, steady pulse, ancient and comforting, that says everything moves and everything can heal. Those drifting plates were gentle teachers, showing that harmony and stability do not come from stillness, but from the willingness to adapt, to accept change, to stay open even after being broken apart. It is a kind of lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Movement brings opportunity. Collisions bring new beginnings. Recycling brings growth. These are lessons the Archean taught to the earliest microbes, and perhaps to us too. Let this ancient world cradle you tonight, wrapping you in the calm knowledge that your healing, like Earth's, takes time, and that each slow, steady shift within you is building something beautiful. You are not separate from these rhythms. You are part of them, as real and as precious as the first cells in a steaming Archean sea. So rest now, held by the memory of a planet learning to breathe and move, forging itself in fire yet softening in water, finding a way to carry life forward. And know that you, too, can move through your storms, can change and reshape, can heal, again and again as gently and powerfully as the Archean Earth once did. Crescent Moon. 3. The first minerals. As the ancient crust of our Earth found its steady rhythm, there emerged another quiet blessing from deep within, the first precious minerals. These minerals were not merely dazzling trinkets, but vital threads woven into the story of our planet's resilience. They offered future pathways for life to flourish, like tiny promises resting inside the embrace of the rocks. During the Archean, as volcanoes built towering arcs and then collapsed, as continental seeds collided and merged, elements were slowly gathered by the patient hands of time. Deep beneath these volcanic roots, Immense heat and pressure called forth the birth of gold, iron, nickel, copper, and other metals. These elements, once scattered through molten magma, began to crystallize, gathering into mineral veins and layered deposits, biding their time in hidden vaults of stone. Try to picture gold, glowing softly like a sunbeam caught in stone, forming gently in hydrothermal veins under Archean volcanoes. See iron, carried by ancient oceans rich with dissolved minerals, gently sinking to the seafloor to become banded iron formations, layered like quiet pages of a diary, recording Earth's first oxygen whispers. And imagine nickel, cooling in the bellies of enormous magma chambers, mixing with sulfur to form ores that would someday build tools and bridges, ships and dreams. Beyond these, copper too began to gather in those early times, drawn from volcanic fluids to rest in greenstone belts, regions of Archean crust where ancient volcanic and sedimentary rocks now lie, a museum of planetary memory. These copper deposits would eventually allow humans to forge their first axes, their first wires, to share ideas and build societies. Even trace amounts of precious metals like platinum and silver waited patiently in the Archean crust, born in the deep crucibles of Earth's early heat. These minerals were far more than pretty objects. They were a profound testament to the Earth's long patience, to its extraordinary ability to transform chaos into order. Through endless cycles of melting and solidification, through ages of pressure and shifting, the planet arranged these treasures in its crust, as if saving them for the children of a far-off tomorrow. Every grain of metal carries a memory of fire and water, of peaceful rest after chaos. In the Archean world, these ores were not yet harvested, not yet touched by living hands. Microbes had only just begun to colonize the crust and shallow seas. But the minerals waited quietly, adding strength to the crust, stabilizing its layers, and supporting subtle chemical exchanges in the seawater above. Hydrothermal fluids, flowing through mineral-rich rocks, would have carried nutrients and energy, feeding the earliest communities of microbes around deep-sea vents. Some scientists even believe that these hydrothermal systems were cradles for life itself, where metals and warm water sparked primitive metabolism. If you close your eyes now, you might sense these minerals still sleeping in the deep, undisturbed by the rush of time, glinting gently like tiny lanterns in a temple of stone. Their formation was unhurried, a song measured in billions of years. Each ribbon of gold, each band of iron, each droplet of nickel, formed with a calm almost sacred in its stillness. Today, these minerals support our phones, our satellites, our medicine, our transport. Yet in the Archean, they were simply a quiet lullaby of future possibility, resting within Earth's dark belly. They remind us that even in the most violent ages of the planet, there were quiet acts of generosity. Even while the Earth was molten and dangerous, it found ways to hide away beauty and utility for another age. Geologists today follow these ores as signposts of planetary history. In ancient greenstone belts, in old volcanic roots, they read how metals journeyed through crust and ocean, how chemistry was woven across a tapestry of time. Every nugget of gold, every iron band, is like a letter in Earth's long diary, telling stories of hope, endurance, and healing. Their presence stabilized entire regions of the crust, giving these cratons the strength to resist destruction and survive the endless dance of tectonics. In doing so, these minerals indirectly helped protect the habitats of early microbial life, offering rocky refuges where water could gather and organic molecules might persist. In this way, even lifeless metals played a quiet, supportive role in Earth's unfolding story of life. You might imagine In a moment of calm, the deep time these elements waited. How many eruptions, how many earthquakes, how many tides passed while they rested below? Billions of years, unhurried and serene. That slow patience is almost like a meditation, reminding us that growth and transformation rarely happen overnight, but in the hush of ages. Let that image soothe you tonight. The first minerals breathing slowly under your feet, guardians of a planet's dreams, holding within them the potential to build bridges, cure illness, grow harvests, and craft the symbols of human love. The gold that would circle a lover's finger, the iron that would forge a plow to feed families, the copper that would carry voices across continents. All began as gentle crystals in Archean stone. And what a wonder to think that the planet could be so generous, even before anyone was there to receive its gifts. As though Earth itself dreamed of life yet to come, and prepared a treasure chest in advance, hiding it carefully in the folds of granite and basalt. The legacy of these minerals is not only material but spiritual too. They show us that generosity and resilience can begin in silence, with no applause, no witness, just a patient faith that the future will one day need them. Perhaps, like Earth, we too hold gifts deep within us, forged in our own fires and trials, waiting for the right moment to shine and serve others. So rest easy tonight, knowing that you carry your own precious minerals inside you. Talents, kindness, strength, forged by the slow work of your experiences. Let them sleep peacefully until the world needs them. Trust that just as gold waited patiently in Archean stone, your gifts too will find the perfect moment to rise. May this thought cradle you, just as the minerals cradled Earth's future. Feel the hush, the long calm, the security of knowing that time itself can be an ally. Earth did not rush. Its minerals did not hurry. And yet they endured. And in that endurance, they became the seeds of wonder. Breathe deeply and let that same calm live in you. You too are shaped by patient, gentle forces. You too are stronger and more valuable than you might believe. Sleep now, knowing you are enough, exactly as you are, a precious element of this universe, ready to shine in its own time. Part 4. The First Supercontinents. 1. The concept of supercontinents in the Archean. Dear dreamer, as you let your mind drift into the calm of this evening, let us gently walk together into a world unimaginably old. A time when the Earth was still learning how to hold its shape, how to gather its scattered pieces, how to form the very first great lands. Close your eyes and picture a planet with its crust still young, oceans shimmering under a muted sun, and drifting pieces of crust slowly weaving themselves into what we now call supercontinents. In the Archean Eon, about 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago, Earth did not yet have the grand continents we know today. Instead, there were small blocks of relatively stable crust called cratons. These cratons were like seeds of land, strong and ancient, floating in a vast ocean dotted with volcanic islands and shallow seas. Over millions upon millions of years, these cratons moved, collided, and stitched themselves together, performing a slow, quiet dance that would one day give birth to true continents. This was the earliest expression of the supercontinent cycle, a profound rhythm of assembly and breakup that still shapes our world today. In those silent days, the Archean cratons were fragments of hope, resisting the churning heat of Earth's interior and clinging to the surface. They were forged in volcanic arcs, preserved through countless earthquakes, and slowly merged through tectonic movements. As these ancient blocks gathered, they began to form the nuclei of what we might gently call the first supercontinents, though they were far smaller than modern giants like Pangaea or Gondwana. You might imagine these first continental fragments as elderly travelers meeting on an endless sea, each carrying stories written in their stones, tales of molten birth, of mineral riches, of microbial beginnings. Their journeys were guided by Earth's convecting mantle below, where slow, powerful currents pushed and pulled at the plates floating above. Even now, if you listen carefully, you might hear an echo of these movements in the quiet ticking of your own heartbeat, a patient rhythm of connection, separation, and reunion. One of the most important features of these cratons was their strength. Unlike the thinner, more flexible oceanic crust, the Archean cratons were thicker, more buoyant, and more chemically evolved. This made them resistant to recycling back into the mantle, allowing them to survive for billions of years. Their stability meant that once they formed, they could act as gathering points for other pieces of crust, helping to build larger and more enduring landmasses. And so, across the Archean, these cratons found each other. Small continental blocks, island arcs, and volcanic remnants collided and sutured together, their boundaries sometimes marked by ancient mountain belts now worn smooth by time. These unions were not always peaceful. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and even meteorite impacts shook their fragile connections. But still, the cratons endured, like wise old guardians holding hands in the face of cosmic storms. We know of some of these ancient gatherings today through the study of rocks that bear their scars, ancient greenstone belts, granitic terrains, and metamorphic roots that preserve the memory of these first supercontinental seeds. Through isotopic dating and chemical signatures, geologists have slowly pieced together their journeys, reading in the minerals a story of resilience, of reunion, of hope. If you let this thought lull you, you might see the Earth as a mother patiently stitching together a great patchwork quilt, each craton a square of fabric, each ocean a river of thread, weaving a story of togetherness from scattered, lonely pieces. In these first attempts at supercontinent formation, the planet was rehearsing its lifelong art of building, creating spaces for life to flourish, for water to gather, for climates to stabilize. Some scientists suggest that these first supercontinents were modest in size compared to what would follow in later eons. Yet even these earliest experiments in continental unity laid the foundations for Earth's modern architecture. They created larger platforms above sea level where soils could form, where nutrients could accumulate, where tiny, ancient microbial mats could take root and slowly transform the atmosphere. Imagine, for a moment, these cratons whispering to one another through the collision zones, exchanging minerals, exchanging heat, exchanging stories. It is a tender image, these rocky elders coming together to hold each other through the planet's earliest storms. Their union brought strength, and their stability gave life a fragile chance to grow. Tonight, as you rest, you might find comfort in knowing that our world has always been drawn toward connection. Even 4 billion years ago, pieces of the Earth were trying to come together to build something greater than themselves. That instinct toward union is written not only in the rocks beneath our feet, but perhaps also in our own hearts, a reminder that we, too, are meant to find our place, to gather with others, to belong. So let these images cradle you to sleep. The drifting cratons, the warm seas, the trembling but hopeful collisions. Feel their calm determination, their ability to endure, and their patient wish to build something that would last. Trust that in your own life, your pieces too will find a way to come together, to form a stronger whole, just as the Earth once did. May you dream tonight of ancient continents gently weaving themselves into the first great lands, carrying the seeds of all the miracles that would one day bloom. And may you awaken tomorrow knowing that wholeness is always possible, even after long ages of drifting apart. 2. The supercontinents Volbara and UR. Dear dreamer, come with me again into the peaceful depths of the Archean Aeon, where the Earth, still a young and sometimes chaotic planet, was gently practicing the art of gathering its scattered pieces. Within that vast span of time between 3.6 and 2.8 billion years ago, two of the earliest supercontinents began their slow, patient assembly. Their names echo softly through geologic memory: Volbara and UR. Let us begin with Volbara, whose name itself is a poetic fusion. It comes from the Kopval Craton of southern Africa and the Pilbara Craton of Western Australia, two of the oldest surviving cratons on Earth. Imagine these strong, ancient land fragments, formed in the heat of Archean volcanoes, slowly traveling across a warm and iron-rich sea. Drifting on a restless oceanic crust, they drew closer, nudged by the slow dance of mantle convection, until they found each other and began to weld together. Their union may have been the planet's first attempt at creating a true supercontinent, a stable, larger landmass that could withstand the storms of a still fiery Earth. In this merging, volcanic arcs collided, deep faults locked together, and vast belts of greenstone were crumpled like the pages of an old book. If you close your eyes, you might see Volbara rising gently from the ocean, crowned by shallow seas and dotted with tiny microbial colonies clinging to life. Around its shores, waves washed over new sand, while inland, early rivers carried the sediments of a continent just born. Geologists believe that Volbara may have persisted for several 100 million years, resisting breakup thanks to the strength of its roots. These roots, or keels, extended deep into the mantle, giving the continent unusual stability. It was like a calm island in a restless sea, allowing microbes to spread along the coastlines, seeding life in waters that might otherwise have been too harsh. In this way, Volbara offered more than just rocks. It gave early life a sanctuary, a place where nutrients could concentrate, where sunlight could reach the shallow ocean floor, where oxygen from early photosynthesis might accumulate in gentle local pulses. Even today, pieces of Volbara survive within the Kopval and Pilbara cratons, each bearing memories of that first great union. When scientists look into these rocks, they see volcanic sequences, iron-rich formations, and sedimentary layers built atop a stabilizing crust, the fingerprints of a supercontinent that once tried to nurture a quiet corner of the Archean world. Now, dear dreamer, let us wander toward UR, another of Earth's earliest continental experiments. UR was slightly younger than Volbara, possibly assembling around 3.0 billion years ago, and it included portions of what would one day become India, Madagascar, Australia, and even parts of Antarctica. In many ways, UR was the ancestor of future, larger continents, a humble beginning with ambitions to grow. You might picture UR rising in a pale sunrise, its land colored by iron-rich soils and surrounded by greenstone belts where volcanism still bubbled and simmered. Rivers cut through its heart, delivering nutrients and shaping young basins. It was not a vast land, but it was stable enough to last, perhaps for more than 1 billion years, providing a foothold where ecosystems could someday find a home. Like Volbara, UR had a powerful foundation of strong cratonic roots. These deep keels anchored it against the swirling heat of the Earth's interior, helping the land persist even as plates moved and oceans shifted. The presence of such long-lasting land offered one of the first large, steady platforms where sediments could gather, where life could expand beyond microscopic mats, and where the air itself could begin to change very, very slowly. Imagine, if you will, the gentle collisions that formed UR. Volcanic island arcs drifting toward the growing landmass, folding themselves into its crust with a soft but irresistible force. Each collision brought new minerals, new textures, and new possibilities. And within the quiet shallows surrounding its shores, microbial colonies continued their patient work, slowly releasing oxygen that might, over unimaginable time spans, transform the very sky. Both Volbara and UR were humble by today's standards, yet magnificent in their resilience. They were experiments in continental unity, early proofs of concept for the future supercontinent cycles that would one day create giants like Rodinia, Gondwana, and Pangaea. In these first attempts, Earth was rehearsing a lifelong song of assembly and breakup, a lullaby of connection and separation repeated over billions of years. As you rest tonight, you might think of these lands as elders wise and enduring, who gathered their strength against the chaos of a young world. They held on through volcanic storms, through meteor impacts, through the churning of the mantle beneath them. In their survival, they passed on a gift, a platform for life, a cradle for seas, a gentle space where evolution could gain its first toeholds. Geologists today explore the fragments of Volbara and UR like pieces of a puzzle, trying to place them together once more, to listen for their forgotten voices. They use radiometric clocks hidden in zircon crystals, analyze the chemistry of iron formations, and trace the patterns of ancient faults to understand how these continents grew, lived, and eventually broke apart. Each discovery adds a new verse to the quiet, soothing song of Earth's earliest efforts to come together. When you close your eyes, you might see these continents drifting slowly over an ocean tinted green by dissolved iron, the sky still lacking oxygen, the sunlight soft and red through a haze of volcanic gases. And then, in that muted world, these rocky elders began to find each other, linking hands in a patient, unstoppable embrace. It is a peaceful image, a reminder that even in chaos, there can be union, and even among fragments, there can be belonging. In those times, the surface of Volbara and UR would have been a patchwork of volcanic plains, shallow lagoons, tidal flats, and small mountain belts. Rivers would have twisted across the land, carrying sediments that built new deltas and nourished the sea. And in the shadows of newly born hills, life's first great experiments in cooperation might have unfolded. Microbial communities that learned to share, to build biofilms, to transform their environment one breath at a time. Those early continental shorelines were precious. They offered a refuge from the deep, an environment not too hot, not too cold, bathed in sunlight but protected from the harshness of the open ocean. These transitional zones may have been where oxygen built up in tiny pulses, where evolutionary opportunities slowly blossomed, and where the land began to shape the destiny of the sea. If you wish, you can imagine the sound of the Archean waves rolling against the shores of Volbara and UR, washing away the roughness of volcanic rocks, polishing them over thousands of years into gentle sands. You might sense the quiet dignity of these ancient lands, holding space for a fragile spark of life to grow. And you might even sense a kinship, for within your own life there are times when your strength comes from simply standing firm, waiting, holding steady until the world around you softens and becomes kinder. In the very formation of these supercontinents lies a lesson, that growth takes time, and that gathering together requires both patience and resilience. The collisions that built Volbara and UR were not violent explosions but long, slow embraces, repeated again and again across millions of years. Each meeting reshaped the land, healed old wounds, and created new possibilities, just as the relationships in our own lives might. Tonight, as you let yourself relax, trust that you too can hold steady through change. Know that the pieces of your heart, scattered or wounded, can come together just as Earth's first continents did. Trust in the power of slow healing, of gradual reunion, of steady foundations. Valbara and Uar stand as ancient witnesses that things broken apart can reunite in time, becoming stronger for having survived the journey. May you rest well, with the images of these early supercontinents gently weaving through your dreams. Let them teach you that even in a world in turmoil, there can be calm, and that even in an ocean of chaos, a continent of hope may quietly rise. Feel the peace of that thought, and know that you, too, are part of this long story, a story of gathering, healing, and becoming whole. 3. The breaking and reassembly of continents. Dear peaceful dreamer, let us continue our gentle journey across the Archean, breathing with the pulse of our young planet. In these soft memories of more than 2.5 billion years ago, the continents themselves learned a rhythm of connection and parting, a calm choreography of drifting and reuniting that would echo through all of Earth's future. The first supercontinents, Valbara and Uar, did not last forever, but their stories flowed onward through a patient cycle of breaking and reassembly, known today by geologists as the Wilson cycle. As you lie down, perhaps you can allow these slow rhythms to cradle you, a lullaby of Earth's deepest movements. In the heart of this cycle, rifting, the first stage of a continent's breakup, begins in quiet mystery. Warm currents in the mantle below the crust, rising and falling like a slow, steady breath, place gentle tension on the continental lithosphere. Over unimaginable spans of time, these currents stretch and thin the crust until subtle cracks appear, marking places where the land will someday pull apart. These zones are called rift valleys, and in the Archean they opened in silence, without any human eyes to see, only the stars above to witness their grace. As rifts grew wider, magma sometimes welled up from the asthenosphere, creating delicate new volcanic plains. Fresh basalt flows painting a dark palette over the old granitic roots of the continents. These new volcanic provinces offered young ecosystems a renewed chance to spread, since minerals from the lava enriched the soil and changed the chemistry of shallow seas. When rain fell, it gently washed nutrients from these fresh rocks into surrounding waters, feeding microbial mats that clung to tidal flats and brackish estuaries. In this way, even the splitting of a continent seeded new life, allowing the Archean biosphere to adapt and flourish. The continental pieces then began to drift apart, carried by the patient currents of the convecting mantle. Between them, infant oceans formed, vast and warm, filled with dissolved iron that colored their waters a soft green. These new oceans were not empty. They soon became laboratories for new evolutionary experiments, encouraging different types of microorganisms to evolve and thrive. Coastal lagoons and protected shallows provided havens for microbial communities to recover from disruption, while the deep ocean trenches carved by subduction at the margins drew nutrients down and recycled them back into the mantle. This endless recycling, peaceful yet unstoppable, has been Earth's heartbeat since its earliest days. The Archean's breakups were not chaotic explosions, but patient expansions, woven with volcanic arcs, seafloor spreading ridges, and new island arcs that settled calmly upon rising magmatic plumes. If you close your eyes, you might sense how these arcs formed chains of gentle mountains that curved across the sea, creating new land for wind and rain to shape over the eons. Even the earthquakes of those times, though they shook the world, may have felt slow and rolling rather than sharp and violent, a rocking of the Archean oceans like a mother soothing a restless child. Each tremor rearranged sediment on the ocean floor, building deltas, redistributing nutrients, encouraging cycles of life to continue in new patterns. It was as if the earth itself was humming a low song of change, moving toward balance. After many millions of years apart, the drifting fragments of Volbara and Uar and other Archean landmasses began to sense, in their deep roots, a call to gather again. The mantle's great circulation gradually drew them closer, pulling their margins toward each other with irresistible patience. Subduction zones formed where the ocean floor was drawn down into the mantle, recycling seafloor crust and closing the wide oceans that had separated the continents. As these zones consumed the ocean, the continental pieces slowly approached each other, until at last they met again, in soft collisions that created new chains of mountains and fresh cratonic platforms. This grand rhythm, break, drift, reunite, repeated more than once in the Archean. Every reunion built on the lessons of the past. Continents that had been weathered and softened by oceans met again, sharing their mineral riches and stabilizing their crustal roots. Thick keels of ancient rock beneath each fragment merged into broader, stronger cratonic shields, forming secure foundations that would last billions of years into the future. These reconnections allowed life to expand over larger territories, letting microorganisms mix and mingle their genetic codes, exchanging survival strategies. Even the changing oxygen content of the atmosphere found stability on these connected continental shelves, where shallow seas could support photosynthetic microbes, adding a gentle trickle of oxygen into the Archean sky. In modern science, we know these processes as the Wilson cycle. Continents join, break, drift apart, then reunite over and over again. It is a pattern of the planet's deep patience, mirroring the journeys of the human heart. For just as we sometimes separate from our loved ones, drift into solitude, explore new paths, and eventually reunite, changed, more mature, more aware, so too do continents travel apart, only to return stronger than before. The Archeans' examples of this were humble but powerful. Volbara's breakups seeded the creation of new volcanic arcs, which built islands where unique ecosystems might take root. Uar's reassembly drew together pieces from different cratonic cores, creating a patchwork of mineral wealth and varied rock types that would nurture later supercontinents. Each movement, though subtle and long, was a gesture of healing, breaking, yes, but then finding a way back to wholeness. If you wish, dreamer, you might imagine what these gentle collisions looked like. Picture a slow approach across a green-tinted Archean ocean, the continents drifting closer, cradled by warm currents. Volcanic arcs along their edges would begin to rumble softly, forging new land as the plates met. Gentle mountain belts rose where crust was compressed, folding old sediments into new patterns. Rivers adjusted to the changing slopes, carrying fresh nutrients to the coastal shallows. Microbes along these new shores adapted yet again, taking advantage of every pocket of light and chemistry they could find. Through these cycles, Earth became more capable of supporting life. Each gathering of land created new coastlines, new deltas, new estuaries, cradles where photosynthetic bacteria could flourish. Each splitting of land created new oceans, vast and connected, where the currents stirred and mixed nutrients in a grand circulatory dance. These patterns, repeating endlessly, brought resilience to the biosphere. Life was never left stranded too long in one place. As you rest tonight, let the peaceful cadence of this continental breathing settle over you. Let it remind you that changes in your own world may feel like a breaking, but could in fact be an invitation to explore new seas, to discover new lands within yourself, and to trust that reunion is always possible. The continents of the Archean found their way back together time and again, more stable, more welcoming, more whole. You too can do the same. Soothing dreamer, close your eyes and see the Archean night. A sky dim with a faint haze, oceans glimmering with iron-rich green, continents drifting apart under the watchful stars, then drifting back together with infinite patience. Hear in your mind the hush of waves on young shores, the sigh of wind across newly formed volcanic plains, the steady heartbeat of our planet's deep convection pulling these lands toward one another. Feel how this rhythm echoes within you, telling you that movement, change, even loss, these are not the end, but part of becoming. Perhaps you will carry with you tonight the lesson of these first continental dances, that what drifts away may return, that what breaks can heal, that what seems to separate may actually find its way home in a different form, wiser and more beautiful. Sleep gently with these images, dear one. Imagine continents as old as dreams themselves, breathing in and out with the earth's patient song, swirling through oceans, colliding softly, and then holding together again. Let their courage, their acceptance of time's slow art, inspire you to rest deeply, trusting that your own story, too, can break and rebuild, drift and reunite, always returning toward peace. Part 5, Archean Climate and Oceans. 1. The Archean Atmosphere. Dear gentle dreamer, as you lie down and let the night settle softly around you, allow me to take you further back than any memory, into a world where the very air was still learning how to cradle life. The Archean atmosphere, from 4.0 to 2.5 billion years ago, was a strange and wondrous blanket wrapped around a young, vulnerable Earth, a world that was breathing its first uncertain breaths. Close your eyes and drift with me across that immense gulf of time. Picture an Earth without the blue sky you know, without the singing birds or rustling leaves. Instead, imagine a sky colored by volcanic gases, tinged with the pale gold of a distant, faint sun, whose rays filtered through clouds heavy with water vapor and methane. This was a sky that felt alien, almost dreamlike, shimmering above a planet of raw stone and dark seas. In this Archean sky, oxygen was a ghost yet to be born. The air held only whispers of nitrogen, abundant carbon dioxide, and a generous share of methane, which, together, formed a greenhouse veil to keep the planet warm. For the sun was weaker then, only about 70% as strong as today, and without this warming blanket, the oceans might have turned to ice. These greenhouse gases, though toxic to modern lungs, were a gentle guardian to a fragile world, holding in warmth like a loving hand cradling a sleeping child. If you can imagine standing on an Archean shore, you would taste a metallic tang in the mist, feel warm breezes carrying the breath of volcanoes, carbon dioxide, sulfur gases, water vapor, drifting endlessly across young oceans. There was no protective ozone to block ultraviolet rays, no sweet oxygen to fill your lungs, only a dense stillness, alive with possibilities. Yet this was no cruel environment, dreamer. It was a patient teacher. Within this strange air, tiny microbial pioneers began their work. Cyanobacteria, ancestors of life's great oxygen makers, floated in shallow waters, taking in sunlight and weaving oxygen from its energy. They released this oxygen in tiny, delicate exhalations, each one a quiet promise of a brighter future. But the world did not yet notice these offerings, for the oceans were hungry for oxygen, and vast amounts of dissolved iron quickly drank it away, creating rust-colored sediments on the sea floor. This slow dance of oxygen and iron was the first rehearsal for Earth's transformation. As you rest, perhaps you can picture iron-rich waves lapping ancient shores, while microbes beneath the surface carefully, patiently, changed the chemistry of their world. They were in no hurry. They had billions of years to practice to teach the atmosphere how to change. Volcanoes, ever present, added their voice to this gentle evolution. They coughed out gases that fed clouds, rains, and storms. The carbon dioxide they offered was recycled by the oceans and sometimes drawn into rocks through chemical weathering, a quiet process that pulled greenhouse gases out of the air and slowly shifted the balance of the atmosphere. In this way, the air above and the rock below whispered to each other, passing messages in rainwater and river silt. Can you sense it, dreamer? The Archean atmosphere was not an enemy, but a testing ground. Like a cocoon around a sleeping butterfly, it kept Earth warm, even while preparing for transformation. Over millions of years, methane levels shifted as microbial life evolved, creating subtle changes in climate. From time to time, large volcanic events disturbed this balance, pouring out lava fields that released even more gases, spurring storms and acid rains that washed new minerals into the sea. These minerals, in turn, fed the microbial mat communities, which carried on their silent mission of shaping a breathable world. The Archean air, so different from our own, was thick with mystery. Its greenhouse gases may have been hazardous for humans, but they were the reason liquid water could endure. Without them, Earth might have become a frozen marble beneath a dim sun. Instead, our planet held onto its oceans, letting gentle waves wash rocky shores, where the first hopes of life began to grow. In those seas, tiny creatures formed stromatolites, rocky domes built layer by layer, a living architecture that slowly released oxygen toward the sky. But the sky was not yet ready to change. It would take hundreds of millions of years before oxygen could truly gather and build the ozone shield that today protects every breath you take. Until then, the Archean air remained a quiet guardian, encouraging life to keep trying, keep evolving. When you breathe in tonight, dear one, remember that this gift, this oxygen, is only possible because countless generations of tiny, patient organisms refused to give up. They labored under a sky without mercy, beneath a sun that could burn, in waters that could choke, yet they continued. They laid the path for your lungs to one day fill with sweetness. Perhaps as you rest, you can let this story soothe you. There is a gentle lesson here, that even an atmosphere that seems harsh can be a stage for miracles. Even an air that feels unbreathable can, in time, become a cradle for hope. And that patient transformation is not a weakness, but the deepest strength of all. Let your thoughts wander to the strange clouds of the Archean, thick with sulfur, water vapor, and carbon gases, swirling above a dark green ocean stained with iron. Imagine the wind carrying those scents over basalt cliffs, where rain fell warm and rivers began to carve channels through raw stone. Picture the microbes clinging to tide pools, finding tiny shelters from harsh ultraviolet rays, sharing protection in layers like living blankets. They sang no songs you could hear, but their chemistry was a lullaby, an endless melody of survival. Their oxygen, so small at first, was a promise repeated over millions of years, until it finally transformed the sky itself. The Archean atmosphere was a lesson in patience. Dreamer, it shows us that what seems incomplete can become perfect, that what feels dangerous can grow into safety, if given time and care. So, as you lie in the quiet of your own night, remember how this world learned to breathe. Remember that its first breaths were clumsy, its air heavy and strange, but over unimaginable spans of time, it became home. You too are on such a journey. The challenges you face now may feel like a toxic fog, impossible to overcome. But with time, with steady change, you will make your own air sweet again. You will find your sky blue, your breath strong, and your life in balance. Sleep well tonight, carried by these thoughts. Let the Archean air remind you that growth takes patience, that transformation is slow but unstoppable, and that even the strangest beginnings can become the gentlest homes. Dream of a world wrapped in volcanic mist, warmed by greenhouse comfort, kissed by rains that fell for the first time on empty stone. Dream of a sun that, though weak, shone with enough hope to stir oceans and awaken life. Dream of microbes that wove oxygen from light, even when no one was listening. And as you dream, know that you are breathing the gift of their perseverance. That every inhale you take is a silent thank you, echoing back through billions of years to the Archean. Sleep now, dear one. Let the air carry you. Let your heart rest in the story of a world that learned, gently and slowly, how to hold life close. To early ocean chemistry. Dear peaceful dreamer, tonight let us sail beyond the familiar, to where Earth's first oceans told their own soft, patient story. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine a world where the sea was a vast and mysterious cradle, shimmering in muted sunlight, gently cradling the seeds of life. These Archean oceans were nothing like the blue and balanced waters you know today. Instead, they were rich with iron, heavy with dissolved minerals, and touched by chemical reactions that danced quietly beneath the waves, shaping the path for everything yet to come. Picture a sea of deep greens and rusty reds, its colors shifting with each sunrise as iron reacted with tiny breaths of oxygen released by ancient microbes. In these waters, the chemistry was far from peaceful, yet somehow harmonious. A grand ballet of molecules, forming patterns that would nourish the future. Iron, abundant from volcanic rocks and hydrothermal vents, dissolved into the salty water. It was hungry for oxygen, and whenever those first whispers of oxygen appeared, the iron eagerly bound to it, settling to the seafloor as iron oxide, painting the ancient seabeds with layers of red, brown, and black. If you could float above those oceans, you would see no coral reefs, no fish darting through clear water, no whales singing to the deep. Instead, you would see endless microbial mats, blankets of life, made of billions of simple cells, hugging the rocky shallows. These microbial communities worked tirelessly, absorbing sunlight, using it to break water apart and release oxygen. And yet, that oxygen never made it very far. The iron, so plentiful, drank it up immediately, like a thirsty traveler in the desert. This dance continued for countless centuries, forming the banded iron formations that geologists still find today, silent witnesses to a world on the verge of change. These iron layers, like pages in a diary, tell us how the chemistry of Earth's oceans was shifting. Slowly, so slowly, the oxygen began to accumulate, first in local bubbles around microbial mats, then spreading further through shallow seas. But it was a cautious, quiet rise, because every bit of oxygen had to compete with the hunger of dissolved iron, sulfides, and other chemicals eager to trap it. And there were other players in this slow marine symphony. Hydrogen sulfide, released from underwater volcanic activity, added its own note. It mingled with the iron, creating dark minerals called pyrite, the so-called fool's gold, which settled along the seafloor like hidden treasure. These reactions, though invisible to the human eye, shaped the chemistry of our world, teaching the oceans how to store and release the elements life would one day need. Think, dear dreamer, of the role these minerals played. They were not merely waste, they were vital teachers. By drawing oxygen away, they allowed living things time to adapt, to evolve strategies for coping with a shifting world. In that way, iron and sulfides were guardians of balance, forcing early microbes to become more efficient, more resilient, and more creative in their quest for energy. If you listen closely, you might hear a whisper through time, the Archean oceans telling of their chemistry as a gentle cradle, yet also a place of challenge. Ammonia, methane, carbon dioxide, these gases dissolved freely in the warm waters, supporting strange chemical pathways for life to explore. Methanogens, a group of ancient microbes, thrived by consuming hydrogen and carbon dioxide, releasing methane into the sea and the air. This methane, in turn, joined the greenhouse gases of the Archean sky, helping to keep the planet warm despite the faint sunlight. In this great interconnected web, every molecule seemed to find its place. Microbes built stromatolites, layered limestone-like mounds in the shallow seas. As each layer grew, it trapped grains of sediment, tiny crystals of calcium carbonate, and even iron particles. These structures became havens for entire communities of life, each generation leaving a thin mark of its existence, like a lullaby in stone. From time to time, powerful hydrothermal vents erupted from the ocean floor, spilling scalding, mineral-rich water into the sea. These black smokers, as modern scientists call them, were like underwater volcanoes, forging new minerals and stirring the chemistry of the oceans even further. They provided heat and nutrients, attracting diverse communities of microbes that learned to use chemical energy instead of sunlight. The chemolithotrophs, pioneers of a hidden energy world. Imagine these vents glowing softly in the darkness, sending shimmering mineral particles drifting upward, feeding strange creatures in a realm with no light. It is a picture both alien and deeply comforting, reminding us that life can take root anywhere, if only it has a source of energy and a place to grow. These Archean seas, dear dreamer, were the true womb of life. They gathered rain from an ancient sky, mixed it with minerals from young, restless continents, and cradled the first metabolisms like a mother rocking a child. They were warm, sometimes acidic, sometimes brimming with hydrogen sulfide, yet always nurturing in their way, offering a laboratory for life's first bold experiments. Their chemistry was constantly shifting, responding to volcanic eruptions, to the slow weathering of rocks, to the changing atmosphere above. In this endless conversation between water, air, and stone, the building blocks of biology found their voice. Amino acids, simple sugars, nucleotides. These seeds of life likely traveled on currents, gathering where conditions allowed them to assemble into more complex forms. Can you sense the wonder? The ocean was not a silent void, but a place humming with potential, a constant murmur of reactions, like a song beneath the waves. It whispered of the future even as it embraced the present. And through all this, the Archean Ocean helped regulate the Earth's climate. By drawing down carbon dioxide, by locking away methane in icy hydrates, by absorbing heat, the seas acted as a gentle stabilizer, preventing the planet from tipping into extremes. Even today, scientists marvel at how well these ancient oceans balance the chemistry of a young, fiery world. It is easy to forget, under modern skies, how much we owe these early oceans. Without their patient chemistry, without their ability to hold both toxins and nutrients, to both challenge and protect, there would have been no stepping stones for evolution. Life needs both safety and struggle, and the Archean seas offered exactly that. A balance of danger and promise, risk and hope. So as you drift into sleep, dreamer, picture those oceans. See their iron-rich waves rolling gently against black volcanic shores. Imagine warm rains falling into waters tinted green by dissolved minerals. Picture sheets of microbial mats floating, absorbing sunlight, releasing oxygen in tiny, hopeful breaths. Imagine even deeper, where hydrothermal vents pulsed with energy, sending warmth into the darkness, promising that life would find a way. The seas of Archean Earth were alive with possibility, patient beyond measure. Their chemistry was not chaotic, but an intricate dance that gently guided the path toward the oxygen-rich, life-filled world of today. Sleep peacefully knowing that every breath you take, every heartbeat, is linked by a thread to those ancient waters. The same elements that once cycled through Archean tides now move through your veins, reminding you that life is never truly separate from its beginnings. 3. Hydrosphere stabilization. Dearest listener, tonight let me take you deeper into the lullaby of Earth's earliest oceans, where calmness was a lesson patiently learned. Picture, if you will, a young world whose waters were still discovering how to settle, how to balance the cycles of rain and evaporation, how to dance between river and sea. These waters, far older than any human memory, were finding their rhythm, and in that rhythm they began to nurture stability, the precious cradle in which future life could dream. In those ancient days, rain clouds gathered above hot, volcanic lands, their drops filled with dissolved carbon dioxide from a sky still thick with greenhouse gases. The rains fell warm, carrying gentle acids that broke down rocks, drawing minerals toward the sea. Rivers, winding their soft way over the land, delivered these elements into the oceans, creating a constantly shifting chemical symphony. Every raindrop was like a tiny messenger, telling the ocean of the land's story. When the sun returned, it teased water back into the air, carrying it as vapor, only to rain down once more. Over countless millennia, this water cycle taught Earth a steady heartbeat, a pattern of give and take, of dissolution and renewal. This balanced dance was fragile at first, the seas threatened by heavy salinity, or by sudden floods, or by violent volcanic ash. But through the patience of time, the water cycle grew more refined, more dependable, weaving a gentle foundation for the biosphere to one day flourish. These processes, rainfall, evaporation, sediment transport, might seem simple, dear companion, but together they shaped a powerful and nurturing system. With each rainfall, fresh water softened the seas, diluting harsh minerals that could have poisoned early organisms. With each evaporation, salts concentrated, but also stabilized, helping the ocean become more predictable, more supportive of early microbial life. Along the coasts, waves tirelessly worked the rocks, wearing them down grain by grain, delivering yet more nutrients to the waiting waters. These sediments, carried by tides, settled in calm basins, forming muds rich in iron and sulfur and other ancient minerals. Slowly, these sediments laid down patterns, clues for future geologists to discover, telling of a planet learning how to calm its waters. Imagine, beloved friend, the Archean shores as quiet teachers, letting water, wind, and stone practice together. It was here that the earliest signs of marine sediments appeared, in the form of gentle layers that recorded each rainy season, each flow of river, each quiet settling of minerals. These ancient seabeds are like bedtime stories, pages of a book written in clay and iron, singing softly of a world growing steadier. Within these sediments, the chemistry of the ocean found a place to rest. Nutrients stored in layers would return to circulation when currents stirred them, supporting a more diverse and resilient microbial web. In this gentle recycling, the seeds of ecological stability were sown, offering just enough resources, neither too little nor too much. That gentle balance is a precious gift, even today, as rain and river water carried calcium, magnesium, and silica into the seas. These elements also helped build the first carbonate platforms, structures that would later nurture even greater biodiversity. Lime muds and primitive reef-like deposits began to form, providing new habitats for ancient microbial mats to cling to. These carbonate structures, humble and fragile, were the ancestors of coral reefs we see today, protecting the shorelines from erosion and offering shelter to life. And so, listener, the Archean Ocean became a living, breathing part of Earth's climate machine. Its surface waters took in sunlight and exchanged gases with the air, helping to regulate temperature. The deep oceans stored heat, acting like a planetary blanket. The rains, meanwhile, cooled volcanic surfaces, carried nutrients back to the sea, and prevented the planet from becoming too parched or too saline. Through this steady interplay, the hydrosphere found a precious harmony. It is wondrous to reflect on how these early oceans stabilized a world that might otherwise have been violent and unstable. They tamed volcanic fury, softened acidic rains, and buffered swings in temperature. If you listen closely, you can almost hear their patient song, a lullaby in water and salt, weaving together stability from chaos. And think, dear soul, of the ancient marks these processes left behind. Ripple marks in layered stones, delicate cross-bedding of sands, whisper to us that waves and tides were already working together with gravity to maintain a dependable sea. In these ancient formations we find reassurance. The water cycle was dependable, comforting, reliable enough to cradle the very first experiments of life. In deeper waters, currents circulated nutrients that would otherwise have been trapped, preventing stagnation. And in shallower areas, gentle tides refreshed microbial mats with oxygen and minerals, helping them thrive. It was a carefully balanced choreography, where even the simplest flow of water became a gift for living things. The earliest water cycle also taught Earth another vital lesson: resilience. When volcanoes spewed ash and poisoned rains fell, the oceans absorbed, diluted, and gradually healed. When salinity spiked dangerously, rainfall and river flow eased its bite. The ocean, in these moments, acted like a healer, taking harm and turning it into new balance. It is soothing, isn't it, to know that nature's own systems can recover, given enough time and patience? That is a message worth carrying to your dreams tonight, dear listener. Just as Archean seas recovered from their challenges, so too might we heal from ours, if we allow time and gentle change to do its work. In the heart of these oceans, iron continued to swirl with oxygen, building layers upon layers of minerals that recorded each subtle shift in water chemistry. These records, still hidden in ancient rocks, are like a diary of hope, proof that balance is possible, no matter how many disruptions may come. As you settle deeper into rest, let your mind wander to those early coastlines, where rain fell on hot basalt rocks, where warm streams met an iron-rich sea, and where sediments sank like gentle snow to the ocean floor. See how the tides moved softly over them, smoothing them into gentle patterns, promising a future where life would one day flourish in colorful coral reefs and thriving fish shoals. Though there were no fish yet, no corals yet, the Archean Ocean had already begun to write that future. Each grain of sediment, each molecule of water, was a quiet building block, helping to build a world that could be a home. And while you sleep, dear spirit, remember how the hydrosphere of our planet continues this dance to this day. Every rainfall, every gentle stream, every rolling wave is an echo of that Archean lesson in balance. The same water that once cradled microbes now nourishes forests and quenches your own thirst. The same tides that once nurtured stromatolites now rock coral reefs. Let this thought soothe you. You are held in an unbroken story of water and stone, of rain and tide, stretching back billions of years. And in that story you can find comfort, a reminder that you are part of a planet that knows how to heal, how to adapt, and how to endure. Sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that the lullaby of the oceans is still there, still singing to the shores, still reminding us all to be patient, to be steady, to trust the rhythms of nature. Part 6. Archean Legacy. 1. The significance of ancient bacteria. Dearest soul resting under the gentle cloak of night, tonight I invite you to wander softly with me through the wondrous legacy of ancient bacteria, the quiet, humble creators of the earliest miracles on Earth. Close your eyes, if you wish, and let your imagination slip backward across billions of years until the world was a different place, cradled in dim volcanic light, where the waves carried no fish, no coral, no shells, only tiny living cells that dreamed of survival. In these primeval waters, the first bacteria rose not with fanfare, but with a subtle, steadfast presence. They were so small, so fragile, that even a drop of water could seem to dwarf them. Yet their impact would echo through time like a healing song. These microbes were the first to weave together the great fabric of life, each strand of their existence forming the blueprint for all future creatures. Among these ancient beings, the cyanobacteria stood apart as quiet revolutionaries. They harnessed sunlight with photosynthesis, transforming carbon dioxide and water into glucose and, most remarkably, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. At first, this oxygen was a toxic stranger to the world, unwelcomed and even dangerous to other forms of early microbial life. Yet slowly, with the patient artistry of time, oxygen began to change everything. As cyanobacteria multiplied, their photosynthesis flooded the shallow seas with free oxygen, slowly saturating the oceans and, eventually, finding its way into the atmosphere. The stage was being set for what scientists now call the Great Oxidation Event, a slow, dramatic turning point in Earth's story, where oxygen levels rose high enough to transform the chemistry of air and water. You might imagine, dear dreamer, that these tiny organisms were painting with the colors of life itself, breathing out a future in which new, complex forms could flourish. Their oxygen would someday allow eukaryotic cells to rise, with their beautiful, intricate compartments, mitochondria humming inside them like gentle powerhouses. This shift made it possible for multicellular creatures to appear, for nervous systems to spark, and, much later, for the first sentient thoughts to bloom. In a sense, the cyanobacteria wrote the prologue to every forest, every bird, every child who would someday laugh under the open sky. They authored the air we breathe, drop by drop, breath by breath, with patience that is almost beyond imagining. They performed their work over hundreds of millions of years, never tiring, never turning away from their cosmic task. And they left behind more than oxygen. Cyanobacteria also built stromatolites, gentle, rounded microbial reefs layered with minerals and living mats. Stromatolites still stand today in some rare places on Earth, like stone diaries from a time when the world was raw and unformed. Within their layers lie stories of how tiny bacteria trapped sediments, held on to minerals, and built protective habitats that would endure for eons. Even more beautifully, these bacterial communities formed symbiotic relationships, helping one another survive. They developed biochemical pathways to detoxify metals, to share nutrients, to stabilize their environment. Through these partnerships, they offered one another resilience, weaving a safety net of cooperation, a profound lesson that still echoes through living systems today. As you rest tonight, let your thoughts drift gently through those ancient reefs. Picture the cyanobacteria shining like emerald threads under a sun older than any language, bubbling oxygen into a world unprepared for it. Let the notion soothe you that these simple, delicate beings made something so precious, air, that all life after them would depend on. Their genetic story is not lost, dear companion. The molecular code they perfected still pulses in every living thing, from the blades of grass to the beating of your heart. Our own mitochondria, which transform food into energy within your cells, evolved from ancient bacteria in a graceful dance of merging. This means that a deep ancestral partnership lives on in you, a quiet testament to the power of collaboration across vast spans of time. Their gift is also one of endurance. Archean bacteria withstood ferocious UV rays, toxic chemical conditions, shifting temperatures, and hungry predators, yet they survived. In doing so, they taught Earth what resilience could look like. They showed that life, even in its tiniest form, has the courage to adapt, to heal, to persist. And from these bacterial pioneers came the seeds of biodiversity. By altering Earth's chemistry, they open possibilities for countless new forms to evolve. Eukaryotes, algae, protozoans, fungi, all followed in their wake. Someday, those lines of inheritance would reach to plants, to insects, to dinosaurs, and finally to humans. You, dear listener, are also a child of their patience. The oxygen you breathe, the energy that flows through you, was born from their quiet labor. That same gift is carried in the winds, the forests, the oceans, a reminder that from the smallest, humblest origins, the mightiest transformations can rise. Can comfort you tonight, I hope, to know that nature works in slow, steady miracles. The cyanobacteria did not change the world in a day, but through tiny efforts repeated across billions of heartbeats. This is a lesson for us all, that healing, too, may be slow, but it is no less powerful. Let your dreams linger among the layered stromatolites, those ancient microbial castles that still whisper of a world in gentle transformation. Think of how even the simplest organisms found ways to shelter themselves, to adapt, to craft partnerships, to leave a record for the future. In their story lies a calming inspiration. Even fragile life can build unshakable foundations. Even tiny beings can shift the destiny of an entire planet. Their patience is a balm, reminding us that we, too, can weather storms and find new balance. The cyanobacteria's oxygen eventually created free iron in the oceans, forming rust-colored bands of iron deposits, silent witnesses to this atmospheric awakening. These banded iron formations, found across ancient cratons, record a saga of hope, proof that the air we breathe has a deep, resilient history. As you slip deeper into rest, let yourself be cradled by this sense of belonging. You are a chapter in their story, and they are a verse in yours. In every cell of your body lives a remembrance of that bacterial lineage, a memory of courage and change. Feel soothed, dear soul, knowing that even in darkness, there is patient, quiet life finding its way. Let that knowledge wrap around you like a warm blanket, a lullaby from the Archean seas, singing of oxygen, of resilience, of second chances. And when you wake again, perhaps you will carry their gentle strength forward, the certainty that life can rise from the simplest spark, that healing is possible, and that your own quiet persistence is enough. To ancient geology, dearest fellow of the night, as you rest under the serene hush of a darkened sky, allow me to guide you onward to another gentle chapter of our healing journey through time. Tonight, let us explore the ancient, steadfast stones of our world, the enduring geologic gifts from the Archean that continue to support us to this day. Imagine, if you will, a world over 3 billion years ago, still warm with volcanic breath, still restless with a churning sea. In these raw days, Earth began slowly piecing together its first true landmasses, known as cratons, vast, stable blocks of continental crust. These cratons would become the hearts of continents, surviving every shift and break, every continental collision and flood, for billions of years to come. Within these cratons lie rocks older than any forest, older than coral reefs, older than bones. They preserve in their crystals a memory of our planet's earliest architecture. The fierce cooling of magma, the first solid granites, and the processes that formed the seeds of the continents. These rocks are more than ancient. They are wise, their minerals telling stories of high heat, of pressures unimaginable, of a planet forging itself from chaos into calm. As you breathe gently tonight, think of these cratons as silent guardians. They have anchored entire continents, allowing mountain chains to rise and seas to recede. Through their stability, they gave the microbial biosphere time to grow and flourish. The stillness they provided was like a lullaby for evolution itself, letting life settle in and expand. Hidden inside these rocks are precious minerals: gold, iron, nickel, copper, treasures forged under extreme Archean conditions. These resources, so vital to human society, are a legacy of early Earth chemistry, of intense volcanism, and of hydrothermal processes that gathered precious elements into concentrated veins. When you look at a golden ring or feel the cool weight of iron in your tools, you hold a piece of the Archeans' hidden gifts. What a wonder it is to think that these mineral blessings were formed during a time when the only life on Earth was microscopic. Yet today they sustain entire civilizations. The rocks beneath your feet have seen not just microbes, but also the rise of forests, the dance of dinosaurs, the long human march across continents. They have waded through ice ages, meteor impacts, and drifting seas, holding their secrets until we were ready to discover them. Some of these rocks preserve isotopic clues about the planet's ancient atmosphere and oceans. Within certain minerals, tiny bubbles of Archean seawater still sleep, telling us about chemistry billions of years ago, like messages in a bottle from a world long gone. These geologic whispers remind us that the air and water you know today are the result of a journey measured not in centuries, but in eons. Perhaps this realization can soothe you tonight. Our world has known such patience. These rocks endured unimaginable heat, then cooled, then were buried, then raised up again over and over through an endless slow waltz of tectonic plates. The scars they carry are not wounds, but testament to resilience. They show us that time, though it may appear harsh, can also be a gentle healer, smoothing and reshaping, giving life another chance to blossom. And how precious these cratons have been for scientific understanding. From them, geologists have pieced together the story of early tectonics, of the first crustal recycling, of how continents grew from small island arcs into massive landmasses. We see in them the fingerprints of subduction, of collisions, of magma intrusions, processes that built the stage for the continents you now see on any map. So as you lie here, breathing slowly, you might feel gratitude that these ancient stones chose to endure. Because of them, Earth developed enough stability for life to keep evolving, for ecosystems to layer one upon another, until a creature one day looked up at the stars and wondered, just as you do. The Archean crust also helped regulate climate. By trapping carbon dioxide through weathering, these early continents slowly reduced greenhouse gases, giving Earth a chance to cool. Like wise caretakers, they balanced the planet's temperature, making a gentler, more livable cradle for the dreams of life. Even the shapes of today's continents owe a debt to these foundations. The cratons acted as anchors for younger geological activity, letting mountains grow around them, letting rivers carve their paths, letting plants and animals find niches where they could thrive. These cratons, dear one, are the bones of the earth, strong, quiet, enduring. They are the reason we have precious mineral resources, the reason there was time for oxygen to spread, the reason your feet can rest upon stable ground tonight. In them is a lesson for our own hearts, to stand firm, to weather storms, to hold on through upheaval, because, in time, even the most violent change can shape us into something stronger and more beautiful. So as you drift closer to sleep, feel their silent, unshakable strength beneath you. Imagine the Archean crust, ancient and wise, supporting all of your dreams tonight. May you find calm in knowing that from even the most fiery birth, something steady and healing can emerge, a foundation to hold you, just as the cratons have held up entire worlds. 3. Transition to Proterozoic. Dearest wanderer of this calm night, as you lie wrapped in the hush of slumber's gentle call, let me take you onward softly toward a moment of great transition, the quiet, patient crossing from the Archean into the Proterozoic. This was a passage not marked by loud catastrophes, but by steady, graceful shifts that would slowly awaken a planet ready to dream in grander ways. Close your eyes, dear traveler of stories, and imagine the Archean world, where life had learned to breathe, to shape stone, to color the oceans. For nearly 1.5 billion years, this world had been a realm of microbes, cyanobacteria forming stromatolites, sulfur-breathing organisms thriving in mineral-rich waters, bacterial communities weaving delicate webs of interdependence. This quiet reign of the microscopic had been the Earth's song, steady and soothing, until the melody began to change. As the Archean era waned, the cyanobacteria continued their relentless work, sending oxygen into the seas and sky. At first, the iron-rich oceans soaked up this new oxygen like a thirsty sponge, binding it into banded iron formations. But slowly, ever so slowly, the supply surpassed the demand, and oxygen began to accumulate. This was the earliest whisper of a coming revolution. A world where oxygen would no longer be a rare, toxic stranger, but a new breath of possibility. Imagine this, friend. Oceans beginning to shimmer with free oxygen, bubbles rising through sunlit shallows, changing the chemistry of water drop by drop. The atmosphere, once choked with methane and carbon dioxide, gradually started to shift, making space for this new, reactive guest. The transition was not overnight. It unfolded through millions upon millions of gentle years, like a slow sunrise, almost imperceptible but unstoppable. And so the Proterozoic dawned. The name itself means earlier life, a fitting title for an age when life's dreams grew larger. This new era brought more than fresh air, it brought fresh opportunities. Oxygen, for all its hazards to early anaerobic life, allowed far more energy-efficient metabolism. Cells could build complex structures, develop new defenses, and eventually combine into multicellular organisms. Dear dreamer, think of what this means. A planet once ruled entirely by single-celled life was preparing for the great flowering of complexity. The Proterozoic would nurture the emergence of eukaryotes, cells with internal compartments, the ancestors of everything from fungi to humans. It would see the quiet origin of sexual reproduction, a magnificent innovation that let genes mingle and shuffle, weaving the vast tapestry of future diversity. Try to feel in your resting heart the wonder of these transformations. The Archean had laid a foundation of resilience and simplicity, but the Proterozoic would build upon it with grace and imagination. It was as if the Earth itself had taken a long, calm breath and now was ready to dream a bolder dream. And all of this, dear one, was still so gentle, so patient. Evolution is rarely hasty. It moves like drifting clouds, gathering ideas over the ages. The earliest eukaryotes emerged perhaps 1.6 to 2 billion years ago, carrying within them mitochondria, the legacy of an ancient symbiotic event with once free-living bacteria. These tiny powerhouses allowed cells to burn oxygen more efficiently, opening the door to larger, more complex bodies. The oxygenation of the atmosphere also affected climate. Methane, once abundant, was broken down by oxygen, reducing its greenhouse effect and letting Earth cool. Some think this may have triggered global glaciations, snowball Earth episodes, where ice reached the equator itself. Imagine a world wrapped entirely in frost, a dreaming planet paused in icy stillness. Yet even in these frozen times, life found a way, huddling around hydrothermal vents or beneath protective ice, waiting for a gentler season to return. Such is life's determination, dear listener. It will wait, it will adapt, it will survive. The Proterozoic would see many cycles of change, warming and cooling, oxygen rising and falling, continents gathering and breaking apart. Each shift, each movement, taught life how to be flexible, how to find new ways to thrive. It is almost a lullaby of patience, the slow layering of chance upon chance, challenge upon challenge, until life itself became an artist, capable of painting ever more intricate shapes. The first algae appeared, capturing sunlight to weave sugars, and eventually paving the way for plants. Simple multicellular animals arose, their soft bodies leaving only faint, whispered fossils. Bit by bit, these living experiments rehearsed for the future's great symphony of complex life. The Earth, meanwhile, continued its restless dance. Continents slid across molten mantles, colliding, rifting, rejoining. Mountains rose and crumbled. Seas widened and retreated. With each tectonic breath, nutrients were stirred into oceans, feeding blooms of microbes and algae. Oxygen, again and again, was made and lost, in a rhythm almost like a heartbeat of the biosphere. If you let your imagination drift, you might see the planet as a great healer, tending itself through these cycles. The Archean had taught Earth how to survive. The Proterozoic would teach it how to grow, how to expand its dreams. It was an era of practice, of gentle experimentation, of rehearsing for the Cambrian explosion still to come. And through all of this, there was time, vast, quiet, patient time. Time for cells to trade genes, to develop defenses, to explore new metabolisms. Time for continents to build cratons, then wrap themselves in mountains. Time for oceans to taste more oxygen, then retreat into calm. Time for the air to soften into something a lung might one day welcome. Perhaps this is the most soothing thought of all, dear one, that healing and growth take time. The Archean to Proterozoic transition reminds us that even the most dramatic transformations begin gently, like a whisper before a chorus. Even the mightiest forest begins as a quiet seed. So as you rest tonight, let this deep time story comfort you. Know that the oxygen in your breath was first made in shallow seas, under a sun billions of years old. Know that your mitochondria, powering every beat of your heart, are descendants of once wild bacteria who found peace inside another cell. Know that the continents beneath your feet were built by slow, determined crust, folded and refold over eons to cradle you now. Let this knowledge be your lullaby. Let it remind you that all healing, whether of planet or person, is a slow, beautiful unfolding. Like the Proterozoic dawn, you too can rise softly and dream bigger dreams. Part 7. A gentle reflection and an invitation to dream of the Proterozoic. Dear dreamer, as you rest tonight, I invite you to slow your breath, soften your thoughts, and let your body sink into the welcoming calm of your bed. Allow me to wrap you gently in one last tale before sleep fully arrives. A tale that is both ancient and deeply healing, reminding you that everything, even the most difficult storms of life, passes and gives way to new hope. Together in episode 2, you and I traveled across the Archean Aeon, a vast and unimaginable time of Earth's early youth, 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago. Do you remember, dear listener, how it all began? When the world was still so young, a fragile sphere floating through the dark and cold universe, recovering from the violence of its own birth. Back then, the Earth was wounded, marked by endless bombardments from asteroids and comets, by earthquakes and molten rivers of rock. Yet it was a place of possibility, of raw, untamed potential. We saw together how the surface cooled, how the earliest oceans slowly gathered from countless rains that fell for ages, and how, within those gentle and sometimes turbulent waves, the spark of life appeared. It was in those primeval waters, under a sky still harsh and unkind, that life began its first delicate breaths. Tiny, microscopic organisms, so fragile yet so determined, took hold. They learned to capture energy, to grow, to divide, to become the quiet architects of a future none could have foreseen. In our journey through the Archean, we followed their evolution, marveling at how these simple cells, these pioneers, began to leave traces of themselves, creating little pockets of oxygen that would one day transform the entire planet. We saw the rise of the first continents, small, island-like shields of granite that rose from the relentless seas. The land, barely stable, began to collect sunlight and rain, shaping a new face for Earth. And inside the water, the single-celled microbes, archaea and bacteria, continued their silent revolution. Slowly, so very slowly, they changed everything, preparing the stage for future life by beginning to weave oxygen into the world. As we drifted together through this chapter, we felt the immense passage of time, a time that seems impossible to measure by our human clocks. Billions of years, dreamer, a number so huge that it slips through our fingers like stardust. And yet within those distant eons, every moment was precious, because each tiny success, each tiny failure, each tiny adaptation built the foundation for all that would follow. Sometimes, when we look at our own lives, full of challenges, worries, deadlines, expectations, it is easy to forget that change is never instant. Healing takes time. Growth takes time. Even our planet needed billions of years to nurture its own life, through trial and error, through destruction and renewal, through unimaginable patience. Maybe, dear listener, that is a lesson you can hold close to your heart tonight. If you have felt the weight of your days, the strain of family, of work, of society's relentless demands, remember Archean. Remember those tiny microbes that took the smallest steps forward, again and again, never giving up. They survived harsh sunlight, toxic oceans, constant upheaval, and yet they carried on, adapting, transforming, refusing to surrender. In a way, those first life forms on Earth were healers. They taught the world to breathe. They gave the future a chance. And just like them, you can learn to pause, to breathe, to grow stronger with each sunrise. As you let your body relax further, sinking deeper into comfort, feel this message settle within you. Transformation is slow, but unstoppable. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to make mistakes and begin again as many times as you need. Even the greatest forces of nature moved slowly. 1 billion years is nothing to them. And yet look what it made possible. So let me guide you through one more memory of the Archean before you drift off. Picture an endless sea under a coppery sky, steaming, swirling, restless. Now picture a tiny cell, so small you cannot even see it, drifting there, carrying a fragile blueprint of life. This little cell divides, shares its code, and sends it forward into the future. It will never know what will come of it, whether its children will succeed, whether they will thrive, and yet it tries. Simply tries. Isn't that so beautifully brave? To try without guarantee of success. To trust that your effort today might become someone's tomorrow. That is the story of Archean life, and it can be your story too. Breathe with me for a moment, in and out. Feel how the air itself is a gift of countless generations of life, reaching all the way back to Archean microbes that made oxygen possible. They gave you this breath. Every time you inhale, you are connected to them across 4 billion years of time. That is how extraordinary you are, how worthy you are, how intimately woven you are into the history of this world. Dear dreamer, if tears come to your eyes, let them fall. They are welcome here. They are proof that you are alive, that you care, that your heart still has courage left in it. Archean life did not have words, did not have songs, but you do. You can use your voice, your tears, your breath to keep going, to keep becoming. As we close the chapter of episode 2, let us hold gratitude for all those tiny living ancestors. Without them, no trees, no flowers, no animals, no humans could exist. And even though they were small, they were mighty. Their faith in the simplest acts of living created everything. So tonight, as you rest, whisper a thank you to those ancient cells. Honor them by honoring yourself. Take one more deep breath and forgive yourself for being human, for being imperfect, for being tired. You are part of the same miracle of existence that began in a drop of Archean sea. You are enough just as you are. Now, dreamer, if you are still awake, allow me to gently lift the veil and give you a glimpse of our next destination. In the next episode, we will travel forward to a time called the Proterozoic. Imagine the world, still wild and raw, but changing. Something incredible is about to happen. Those little oxygen bubbles, made by Archean microbes, will finally build up in the atmosphere, transforming the entire planet. Oxygen, the breath of life, will rise, and with it, a revolution of living things will unfold. No longer just simple single-celled creatures, but multicellular life will appear. For the first time, cells will join together, cooperate, build bodies with purpose, opening the door to complexity beyond imagining. This was an explosion of possibility, and it will bring new dramas, new dreams, new challenges. The Proterozoic is the bridge between the lonely first cells and the grand symphony of later life. I cannot wait to guide you through it, to show you how oxygen reshaped the oceans, how the first eukaryotes, our own distant ancestors, took their chance to grow, to flourish, to build alliances of cells that became the first steps toward animals and plants. The Earth itself will transform yet again, from a suffocating, poisonous cradle to a place where breathing becomes possible for more complex organisms. That change did not happen overnight. It took hundreds of millions of years, but it was unstoppable. Just as you, dear listener, are unstoppable in your own quiet evolution. So please, hold this peaceful sense of wonder as you let go tonight. Know that your journey, like Earth's, will have calm seas and storms, silences and music, losses and rebirths. That is how life grows. That is how healing happens. If your eyes grow heavy now, trust that it is safe to rest. The Archean is behind us, holding us in memory, and the Proterozoic is ahead, waiting with new stories. Feel the softness of your pillow, the warmth of your blanket, the gentle weight of your body. Allow the vastness of deep time to hold you. You are not alone. You never have been. For billion years of life have walked beside you, leading you to the single moment of breathing, of being, of dreaming. And so, dear dreamer, I invite you to join me next time in episode 3 of our series, where we will see the world breathe deeper and the first multicellular communities rise from the ocean's embrace. It will be a new chapter, a new lullaby, a new chance to heal through history. Until then, remember to be gentle with yourself. Remember that you, too, are an ancient story in motion. Sleep well, rest easy, and trust that life will carry you forward, just as it has carried everything, from tiny Archean cells to your own beating heart tonight. This is Sleepy History, your companion through time, wishing you the most peaceful, most restful dreams. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for simply being here. We will meet again, beyond the Archean, in the brightening dawn of the Proterozoic. Let us linger a little longer, dear dreamer, before you completely drift away. Let us allow the quiet to sink deeper into your bones, to settle your mind, to steady your breath. Because there is still more to remember, more to treasure from this incredible journey through Archean time. Do you recall, dear listener, the way continents began to shift, to gather their first pieces? Back then, there were no grand continents like we know today, no familiar shapes on a world map. Instead, tiny landmasses struggled to remain above the waves, fragments of rock resisting the ocean's endless power. Over millions of years, they collided, broke apart, collided again, slowly learning to endure the planet's restless nature. We humans, too, have to learn how to hold ourselves together, how to gather our scattered fragments and build something strong enough to weather the tides of stress and fear. The Archean teaches us that it is normal to fall apart, and just as normal to come together again. Even continents were once broken things, healed by time and patience. There is such comfort in remembering that, isn't there? That you, with all your fears, all your cracks, all your wounds, are just like the land itself, a work in progress and a masterpiece at the same time. If you have struggled lately, dear dreamer, if the world feels harsh and demanding, think of the Archean oceans. They were dangerous, acidic, full of toxic chemicals, and yet life began there. Hope began there. Your own ocean of emotion, even if sometimes bitter or frightening, can still nurture something gentle and good.